Hey folks, welcome back to Meta Abuse. This week we've got Mark MSX back from the Electric Underground channel, and I've also got Lucid Tactics with me as well. We're going to be discussing a topic that I think all of us have been sort of talking about in the background for a little while, which is beginner bias in games design. And I know Mark particularly has spoken about this in various ways and topics circling this for a while. And games to me seem like they're getting easier and kind of more boring in a lot of ways. And I don't think this is something that is localized just to one genre, which is why we got Mark to come on, because Mark's got a lot of experience talking about this in terms of arcade game design and action game design. And Lucid and I have been talking about this quite a lot to do with things like strategy games too. And we're interested to see if there's any kind of overlap and whether these issues kind of map in any sort of way, or whether we're just kind of, this is just all farting into the breeze and it's just kind of speculation. So I'll just introduce the topic essentially. That I think that in terms of modern games, it seems to be that, this is kind of my thesis, I guess, that in order to make more money, developers are having to appeal to a larger, wider audience. Okay, and they kind of dress this up as some form of the word accessibility. Yeah, they want access to more players. And so they have to make games more appealing to more people. And one of the downsides of that is that players who, like, I'd say dedicated gamers rather than casual gamers, tend to get left out in that. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think even the way games are designed now goes around this. It's more than just like difficulty in like a slider sense, like Doom Dark Ages, you just slide it. There's much more going on here than just, let's turn the slider down a little.
So I was interested to find out how this has happened, why this has happened, and most interestingly to me personally is what effect this actually has on the design of the games that we're seeing now, because it's clear that games are being designed, to me at least, it's clear that games are being designed from the ground up to appeal to people with less legacy skill, particularly. Lucid, what are your thoughts on this? Because I know you and I have been sort of talking about this a little bit in the background.
I think it's interesting. I think there's definitely, like, it seems that that's happening. It seems there's this thing that modern, especially Western, like American game studios do, where they're trying to just... I've been talking about with my buddy who I'm designing this game with for a while about like why this is happening, especially in American game studios. But it feels like they're just trying to like sand down the edge of these games. I think they've been taught this in school. I think part of what I have a whole big conspiracy theory about this, but I think okay, I'm gonna go straight like conspiracy theory on you guys. I think what used to happen is back in the 90s, the smartest people, like some of the smartest programmers, some of the best people, they were doing games. Like you had really brilliant people doing video game design and video game programming. And it was small teams and people would mostly do multiple things. And like the guy coding was also the guy doing game development. Fast forward to today, we have this like ecosystem where you go to school and you get your game developer license. And who's teaching game development? It's people who've never made a good video game that sold a lot of money, but they have some rules. And somewhere in there, they're teaching them like, well, this is how you make a good video game. You put this system in and you make it simple. Don't confuse. Somehow people are learning these things and they get a degree and they think they know what they're doing and they fuck everything up. I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. But
yeah,
I actually think that's like really accurate. I think you're 100% on because having talked to people who go to game school a little bit, and like this is something that really fascinates me, so I've been researching it a lot, is I think one of the main differences is that like the credentialism of game design now is really software stuff. So people teaching game design are like software types of people. They're not game designers, game programmers. Like you said, in the 90s, there was no formal training for this type of thing. So it was artists, creatives who were doing it. Whereas now, because there's this whole formal system, you go through the credentialism of, oh, you learned how to make physics code. So now you're a proper game developer. And then they come out of school and they're like, all right, I know how to program physics. So why don't we add physics to everything? And this is something, there's a term for it. We call it like Euro shmups. This is one of like the hallmarks of American and European made like arcade style games is they immediately add physics to everything, even though it doesn't work in the game design super well, because I believe what you're saying, like they're trained to do that. And so it's like, I know how to add physics. Let's add physics. And you can see that with a lot of our games now, where like that more pure direct style of design is now just under all of this. We add more engines, add more code equals better, basically.
Yeah. The other thing I want to kind of add to my...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, can I add one more thing to my opening statement? Which is, there's this idea that if we make games easy, if we make them very approachable, if we make it so that any choice you make, you're probably going to do okay, right? That's like more the strategy game side.
Yep.
If we do that, people will like it. They won't bounce off it. They'll be happier. I want you to look at this. I just pulled this up because I normally start these streams with SteamDB up. But look at all these top games. Is Counter-Strike 2 easy? Like, is Dota 2 easy? Is PUBG easy? Like, these are hard games. You're going to lose a lot. Like, you're going to get your ass handed to you. People like hard games.
Yeah.
Like,
I think
I don't know
one
where this
difference
idea...
is...
There are people... there are people who like a super simple game that just want to, like fucking sit and eat like a huge bowl of Cheerios or something and not be interrupted while they're playing their game. Like, they're basically just the one-button Andes, right? Most people like a challenge. So when people are like, oh, we're going for the main audience, we're going for the mainstream gamer. The mainstream gamer is not the guy who's, like, wants to play a game with one button.
Yeah, one thing I've heard is that I think the Doom developer guy talked about this is like all those examples you listed there. A lot of modern developers will segment out multiplayer from the equation. So you show them, be like, look at all these really difficult multiplayer games. And they'll be like, yeah, that's multiplayer, whatever. In single player. So I think that happens a lot where they don't, they'll say like difficulty in multiplayer, that's great and that's cute and everything. But in single player, that's where it's a problem. So I think that's one thing is they'll discount it. Because I agree, it's like it's not a coincidence that a lot of the high skilled games tend to hang around for a very long time. That's not a coincidence, but a lot of these guys will say, yeah, but that's multiplayer, not single player.
Yeah.
I think this stuff is kind of dangerous in a sense because it feeds into itself. And okay, this is my conspiracy theory, right? I think that, Western society particularly is getting dumber. And I think that the more we start appealing to the lowest common denominator, the more that the lowest common denominator is just going to become leveled out at an even lower level. So the more we make these kind of games that are easy, kind of slow paced, very passive entertainment versus active entertainment, the more that people are going to want that and the more the developers are going to be making more of those games. And it's actually things like Counter-Strike and stuff are, they're contrary to that. But developers aren't incentivized to make those kind of games because they know that you can't capture the lightning in the bottle that easily. Look what happened with Look at what happened with Creative Assembly and Hyenas, right? They spent, what was it? I heard something like $200 million building a studio just to make this one game, and they'd already got a big successful franchise with the Total War games, with the Warhammer, Total War Warhammer. They were making an absolute killing with that game, and then they spent an insane amount of money on this project because somebody, some bigwig looked at the multiplayer stuff and was like, oh look, they're making loads of money on the extraction shooter or whatever it is. So this is like 7 years ago when those things were really, really popular, when things like Fortnite and that were just blowing up. But you then spend 7 years or whatever it is building this enormous team, spending all this money on this big studio. You get about 2/3 of your way through the game of game development, and you put up a load of media for people to look at, and everyone goes, kind of over that stuff now. And they go, oh well, there we go. And they just literally set fire to £300 million or whatever it was. Some insane amount of money that must have hurt And to build it, I mean, they even built an office. They built an office for this game, pretty much, from what I was gathering. So I think that a lot of these developers are looking at high skill stuff like that, and they're like, but yeah, remember what happened with Hyenas? And what was the other one that was cancelled recently? There was another big
Concord,
extraction,
wasn't it?
Concord, right? So this is not like an isolated case. I think developers are sort of between a rock and a hard place in some sense, because single player stuff tends to not sell so well, especially in niche genres that us guys seem to like. But then it's too much. It's too much of a gamble to make a big selling multiplayer game that will become the next PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds or whatever. So, but I think
for strategy games you need to have a single player component. Otherwise, going multiplayer only is like. But
doesn't work.
Wild.
I mean, I think I think most games, like Halo, had a good single player.
Hell yeah.
I'm not a first person. I think going multiplayer only is so fucking risky, because it's like, if for whatever reason when people get on, nobody's on at that time because maybe you have like a few bad weeks in the press, your game's permanently dead. Because once people are on and they can't get a game, your game's over. But if you have people
I call it player
playing a single player game, it's so risky.
If you're multiplayer only, if you don't have the player base, you literally don't have a game. Like your game is the player base. So if you're this upstart scrappy developer and you're like, let's make a multiplayer game, that's not going to work. You actually, it's kind of like in a weird analogy, the whole like trying to be a streamer now is you first need to assemble an audience first and then you stream. But it's like, streaming to build an audience now is like really, really difficult. Multiplayer is the same way. I think it's like if you have a big franchise and you decide, all right, we've got this huge user base here. Now let's branch them into a multiplayer system. That seems to work better than just going, full Concord. What the hell's that? And everyone's going to play that. It's
if you've got Star Wars as your IP or Star Trek or something that is well known, or Counter-Strike or whatever, it's quite easy to get people on board for that kind of thing.
But Souls is attempting it now. We'll see how it goes. They're attempting that right now with Night Rain.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I didn't bother with that one. That didn't look my kind of thing. But interestingly, this kind of if we bring this back towards the discussion, I think this very much it sets up something I wanted to kind of like define first, which is what is the difference between like a casual gamer, and I don't mean that in too much of a disparaging way, really, but it's just somebody who probably buys, like they install Steam and they might have 3 or 4 games on it. There's a lot of those people, and they so in the strategy gaming community we have people who they basically just play Civilization. That's it. And there's a whole lot of people so in the UK and Europe, soccer's a big thing, right? So we have football manager games. And I know so many like non-gamers who will just play Football Manager, and they're guys who they just go to work. They've got 2.4 kids,
Madden,
and they do the job.
States, it's Madden,
yeah, right. Okay, so that's Madden, is it? And I imagine baseball games probably similar, But so there's people who just play those games. So there's one element of casual gamers. They're actually quite hardcore about the one game that they play, but they just tend to play one game. There'll be people who play just nothing but Dota, and there'll be people who play nothing but Counter-Strike. And then you get people who...
What's the other big one? I don't
think that makes you a casual, though. Like, if you only play Dota, that may ruin your fucking life.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. So, but like, okay, so then you get kind of people who, like, I put my brother into this category, who are gamers, but they're not like constantly plugged into it like I am, for example. Whereas every big
mid-casual. I think that's the term they use in Japan. Mid-casual.
Mid-casual, right?
Term, right.
So my brother, like, he will play. He likes Total War Warhammer, and he likes certain strategy games. He likes certain action games, so he'll play FPS stuff with his mates. But again, it's very much he's a gamer, but he hasn't got so much time for it now. And I think there's a lot of people like that in his kind of age bracket, sort of 30s, where they're having kids and stuff, and they don't have so much time for gaming. But gaming is still a main pastime, and that edges into being the sort of casual market that I think developers are trying to get. And one of the ways they do that is by homogenization of game mechanics. But we can come into that later. But so I think it's important to kind of like just separate what it is that we're talking about, because not everybody is permanently plugged into the internet and permanently plugged into games particularly on like, us three, for example, we like to talk about games as an abstract topic, and I think there's very few people who are in that kind of category. And I do wonder if sometimes that the way that I analyze games, with my legacy skill, because I've been playing games since the 80s, right, mid 80s, and games were difficult back then. And so I've seen the gradual curve of how games have become generally marketed as being easier and easier, particularly after sort of the mid 90s. I do wonder if I'm a bit biased in the way that I approach this topic, because I have got that legacy skill, if you want to call it that.
Yeah,
and
I would say, because I've thought about this a lot, battle mode, I would say you are biased, but so is your audience. That's the funny thing. It's like, am I biased towards hardcore dedicated gamers? Yes. But everyone watching my channel also shares that bias, because my brothers, for example, they would be in the casual gamer category. If I weren't blood related to them, they would never find my channel in 5 billion years. They would never come across my analysis. They would never come across any of this shit. They would never come across this podcast. So the guy playing Civilization, and he's just like having, he's Civilization guy. The guy, that plays Madden, he will never come across your analysis, this discussion, these topics. He's having a great time in his own world, doing his own thing. So yeah, your analysis is biased, but the people looking for analysis, that's an audience bias there. Like, you have to be a certain type of gamer to even care about analysis in the first place.
Yeah, I don't think, though, that... Like, I think people have different amounts of time and money to spend on games. Yeah. And some of the amount of time you have to spend on games is dictated by how interested you are in them. Like, you may have 20 other hobbies and gaming's like a small one.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that, like, because somebody doesn't have a lot of time, that they want to be fed slop, which is the argument. Like, we'll get down to it, but that's sort of the idea, is that there's this casual gamer, and they want to be fed slop.
I would amend battle modes, like, gamers are getting dumber, which is, I mean, I can definitely see that happening, but I would say actually what it is...
I'll be a bit careful saying that, sorry. I didn't mean that. Like, okay, they are. I think Western civilization is arguably becoming dumber. I mean, if you
I would say, in a sense, that they're becoming more compulsive. That's what I would say. And I think people are becoming, ironically, in a lot of ways, self-aware and intelligent. Like, we're so obsessed with ourselves, and we think about ourselves constantly, and we're aware of our own awareness. So there's a lot of intellect happening. But in terms of like engaging with media, there's a lot of compulsive habits that have built up. And usually that's what often leads a lot of tastes, is that compulsive element of you're encountering something and it's not playing how it's supposed to play in your mind. It's not feeling how it's supposed to feel. It's not like dumbness. It's like, this is incorrect because this should be this way and it's not this way. Therefore, it's wrong.
Certainly something that like Lucy and I were noticing in strategy games, I'd say, is that people's attention spans seem to be less. Like, I'm just saying that, for example, like, I can't get anybody to play a game that requires you reading a manual now. So if I
exactly.
So like, we ain't got Richard here yet, but like, he plays a lot of like classic war games, and there's lots of modern classic war games, and those seem to be kind of immune to this sort of, this sort of like noobification a little bit. There are games that are more oriented at beginner war gamers, but for the most part, your target audience of war gamers is like ex-military people and armchair general dads, and they're happy to play stuff that looks like a Windows spreadsheet. So I think that that genre is a little bit more sort of immune to it, and I think, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. So
I think it's an extremely niche genre, though. That is a very niche. Yeah.
It's bigger than you think.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's like, if you had books, and people are doing audiobooks now, it's like faster, more convenient, easier. Yeah. It's like, oh, we used to go to the library and study. Now you watch a documentary. Now, there's not documentaries to cover enough stuff, but if there were great documentaries on all the things that were in the library, it's probably just a lot more efficient to go watch a documentary on something where somebody's really honed it, So I think with games, it's similar. Like, oh, let's go back to the old days where you had to read a manual to play a game. Or we could have a game where developers are like showing you new features in like a fun way. in the game and they're like bringing you along with it, like, yeah, I want that. And I think that's what people say. So I don't think that's bad. I think it's just an evolution.
I think the main issue that I run up against with like how this play, because I don't play mainstream games. I don't think many of us in this call do. We're not like mainstream gamers. But I think one issue with it is that one of the most powerful uses of mainstream media, where it's mainstream film, mainstream music, mainstream games, is when they're done really well, they have the ability to elevate taste of a large population, versus you can have the most niche, amazing, hardcore thing that 15 people play. But if you have something that's really well done and elevated at a large scale, that can help lift the tastes of a large amount of people towards more niche, like it can be a kind of that gateway into more hardcore styles of design, or more high level style of design.
Maybe
and
like
stuff.
from soft stuff.
Yeah,
like
so Souls stuff would be
Souls.
like the classic example of this we have now. I would say that would be its role. Like one of the main things about Souls that's so special is that it is doing that on a big scale, not on a small scale. It's like lifting an entire huge amount of people's taste towards something that they normally would never have a palate for. So that's I think one of the most important functions of like big mainstream games when they're done really well. I think Doom 2016 was like this as well, where they can help sort of create an ecosystem for smaller, more hardcore things to kind of connect with mainstream players a little bit more.
Yeah.
How much about this discussion do you think relates to difficulty? Like just as a concept in gaming, like whether that's classic difficulty or whether it's just kind of organic difficulty, like, so for example, what the difference I mean there is classic difficulty settings would be like easy, medium and hard modes, in an arcade game or in a strategy game. And organic difficulty would be something like Dark Souls, where you have this RPG system where you can kind of pick your weapon, pick your path through the game, and you can make it easier or more difficult for yourself depending on player choice, player agency, essentially. And I think that, like, I want to know, like, how much of this kind of casualification, if you want to call it that, of gaming is down to changes in how players in general, the mass audience, want to experience difficulty. How much the media has had an input in that? Because I know Mark's talked about this. The media are very, very. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to challenge some of the, like, when we're talking about casualification, like, the big games aren't that casual. I think the casualification is the casualification of failed video games. Like, it's mostly the studios.
Okay, so
you could argue Civ has been like on a downward trend, but they've finally fallen off a cliff. They've just pushed it more and more casual until eventually their diehard fans can't take it anymore.
Absolutely,
Tekken 8.
Tekken 8 or Stellar Blade, that's another one that everyone's raving about being great, and it just, gameplay wise, it's not great. It's really not that good.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are going to be these top listing games that we've got on Steam are generally exceptional games, to be fair, but I don't think that they are the majority of games. Like, I think the majority of games,
they're the top. If you're the top of Steam, you're like the king of the universe, basically.
Yeah, right. And so I think that the vast majority of games that are coming out now have some elements of this kind of push towards being more casual. I mean, there's the whole meme about yellow paint everywhere. Yeah, the whole like Ubisoft thing with yellow paint to show people where to go. There was the meme about what would
like, you're making my point for me.
I'm sure, but what would
it's a mind virus for dying studios. We don't see studios that are going super casual and knocking it out. We see studios. Here's what we see. We see studios with huge IPs that have immense billion-dollar values, and they hire people out of these design schools to make the next iteration, and they're in the slow process or fast process of fucking it up by making it casual. It doesn't make the game sell well. They fuck it up. That's fine. But still, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm open to looking at evidence where I'm wrong.
I mean,
but
Stellar Blade sold like absolute hotcakes, man. And it had the sex appeal, and that was a big thing. And it really the political thing around Stellar Blade really amplified the game sales in a big way.
I know.
But, I mean,
do you think Sony intentionally tapped into that? Because I was like, maybe Sony were playing some 4D chess. Do you think, or no?
No, I think they, because
we're not giving that credit.
I know a bit about Sony, and
so they were not playing 4D chess.
I don't think so. I think that they saw an opportunity and took it, because it was an opportunity where suddenly the financial side of not being woke suddenly became bigger than what they were getting from the virtue signaling. So I think they just rode the wave. They're like, oh, here's an opportunity. I don't think they planned that. That's just my opinion, but in terms of the game design, I mean. Yeah. I think you did a video on this, didn't you, Mark, on Stellar Blade?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've watched loads of people. I've not got the game. I've watched people play it online, and
I played it firsthand. It is like Banjo-Kazooie level. It's the best way to describe that game. There's certain sections of the game I'm like, am I playing Banjo-Kazooie right now?
Yeah, I'm glad you remember that one.
Yeah.
I had that game in the N64.
Yeah. Is it a gacha game? No?
It came from here's the interesting thing. Stellar Blade came from a gacha studio.
Yes.
So it has even though it's not technically a gacha game, you can feel the gacha energy so strong. You can feel it you can take the developer out of the gacha, but I don't know if you can fully take the gacha out of the developer. You can just feel the energy soaking through its pores. It's so funny.
I mean, here's the thing, though. Nikkei is, for what it is, it's actually quite a good game. It's way better than most gacha games, and that's one of the reasons why it's sold so well. I mean, it's got the jiggly boobs as well, and that's going to sell like hotcakes. I was talking to people.
Yeah, I think ironically, the next wave of AA stuff is going to come out of the gacha guys, because they're the most prime candidates of. We've got a bunch of developers, because these gacha games, you look at the staff list, it takes a lot of people to work on those damn thing. The Chinese ones and the Korean ones. I don't know about the American ones, but there's a lot of production going into these. There's a lot of artists hanging around. So the transition from, what it's called, Nikkei or Nike, whatever that game. Yeah, that game. Going from that to Stellar Blade, you can see, the production chain extending, right? You can see it being possible. Whereas if you're just some indie developer at a small scale, how do you go from a small indie game to that? How do you get there?
Nikkei makes more money than everything on Steam put together, basically. Nikkei, its yearly revenue must be higher than the GDP of some countries on the planet. It's insane.
I don't know if I've
It's this random gacha game that there's no way it's
don't Google it.
Come across the radar. It's a random gacha game.
Okay.
It's crazy, these random gacha games, how much money a lot of them are making. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It's really simple gameplay, but they've made it in a really, really compelling way.
I've heard from artists though, if you're a really talented artist, right? Where do you go to get paid for your work? Where will you get really good pay and the ability to draw lots of stuff is these types of games, right? The fleet of artists that game must employ. So then when you're all right, we're going to scale this up and make it a really nice looking production, you have it there. It's there at your fingertips.
Yeah. Well, I guess making all that money, they can afford all that staff as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's going to be an interesting thing.
I'm going to put a proposition to you guys. I feel like a lot of the reason so one question is why is it that difficulty is good? What is it about the human psyche that these games that are difficult, a lot of people like them? Why is it that the people on this podcast right now, why do we like them?
Well, I would say from a game design level, I always describe difficulty as your fuel, your gasoline. Because if you don't have difficulty, a lot of your game design doesn't have that fuel to be meaningful. For example, let's say you put in you guys are strategy guys, so I'll try to come up with something that's kind of an analogy to that. But it's I
play action games mostly now, by the way. I'm pretty much I haven't played any strategy games.
So let's say you put in a really well-made combat system with a lot of depth and a lot of even let's say DMC3, for example. Imagine DMC3, but only the easy mode exists in that game. There's no Dante must die. There's not. It's just easy. That's it. That's all there is. a lot of the fuel for that game's mechanics, balance, enemy design, boss design, level design has no meaning because there's no consequence to anything. You could just fire guns the entire time and win. You could swing around. You could do whatever you wanted. Whereas I would say like difficulty clarifies the design of your game really well. So basically, the more well designed your game is, the more it can withstand difficulty, and the more kind of sloppy it is, the more difficulty will start to show, all right, this is not working super well. And so I think a lot of this also too with difficulty, one reason why it's getting lowered isn't just, there's a lot of reasons, but one of them that's kind of interesting is maybe the developers are like, damn, if we turn up the difficulty too high on this thing, it's going to expose how poorly balanced this game is. It's going to expose like a lot of things we're worried about getting exposed right now. So
right.
like a
it's
classic
like you can play
example.
this game 10 ways, but
yes,
if we turn up the difficulty high enough, you can only play it one.
One way, exactly. Now you're getting, exactly. That's one thing that really comes across when I'm doing like feedback, like or looking at early games and stuff. Because like, for example, no matter how poorly designed a game is, if you just keep throwing health items in there, it'll be fine. So you could have the worst designed game ever, poorly balanced hitboxes, poorly balanced enemy design, poorly balanced everything. And if you just feed the player resources constantly, you're like, look, it works. And so I think that is also one reason why difficulty tends to be a lot lower as games are getting bigger and more complicated and more messy. They're like, we're afraid if we actually test what this system looks like in a really like clear way, that it's not going to look that good. It's going to be because like, you sell, you can play this game with 10,000 different weapons and styles and stuff. But then you turn up the difficulty. It's like only one of these is actually viable and good and the rest are bad. So that's one big reason why I value difficulty so much is it's kind of like the fuel of your game design. It really, and you see this in multiplayer too, right? Multiplayer games, the better designed the system is, the higher the competition can be. Obviously, multiplayer, you're PvP or against other people, but you can see like one really well-designed multiplayer game at high level, you can see all of these dynamics happening. It's like, whoa, there's a lot of skill here. Where some games, at high level, it just be Tekken 8. You just look at it and you're like, yeah, there's not a lot going on here. It shouldn't be that one of the best Tekken players in history, Nii, is now up against guys that in the previous Tekkens just spammed their way and couldn't touch him. And now he's like sweating for his life against American spammers. Something is wrong with this picture. So
that's broken
difficulty
the whole
really
game.
clarifies how deep a game can be in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So I think an interesting paradigm for this, for difficulty and things like that, is learning. Like players like learning things. So I think games that do this well, they tend to like, for a strategy game, like in an RTS or something, they give you a few units and then the next mission you get like a new unit and you're like, oh dude, I got this new unit. And you had to learn how to use the first 4 units well, and now you get to learn how to use the 5th well. And then you get a 6th unit and you're like, oh, I got a 6th unit. And it's so cool. And you get to learn how to use it. This could be not units. It could be anything. It could be combat mechanics in a fighting game. It could be like how do you interact with like grappling or something in an open world game. So there's all these mechanics, and all these mechanics add complexity. And if you give the player complexity, all this complexity at the beginning, they're going to be super overwhelmed and overloaded. But if you give it to them like as you go, it's not going to be overwhelming. But then you're like, well, what does this complexity do? If all I have to do is hit one button to win, then what's the point of having any of this shit? So to make players interact with all the complexity you put in, you need to have fun things that like, okay, I gave you this grappling hook. Now you have to figure out how to use it. And we give you these challenges and you have to figure out the right time to use it. Maybe you always have to use it in this case, or maybe there's an option or whatever it is. But basically the thing is that like a good game, so like Dominion's my game. It's not my game, but it's a game I play a ton. It's got this super long learning curve. You start and you never stop. It just keeps going and going and going. And you're learning, by the end, you're learning about stupid archaic systems and things like that. But that's fun. The whole thing is fun. Now, Dominion's is hard. It's got a bit of a cliff at the beginning. But having a game where, like, I think it's really the learning that's fun. And I think there are types of players who don't want to learn.
Yes.
There are types of players who will pay money to not play your game and have it play itself, or will just read the guide and just implement it. Like, there are people who just want to shut off their brain. I don't think this is the middle of the bell curve. I think it is a significant portion of the tail, but those people who want to turn off their brain, they tend to be easy to cajole into buying pay-to-win features, into buying pay-to-win DLC, into buying just weird cosmetic things. They're easy to get money from because they just want to like do things. But if you enjoy the challenge, you don't want to pay to not have the challenge. That's why you're there.
Listen, I'm going to answer your original point, Lucid, and bring it into this, because I think this highlights a big difference between people who like active experiences when they're gaming and people like passive stuff. And some, like, I found that even in terms of players who like active games, active gaming. And what I mean by passive gaming is there's a massive market for people who like stuff like visual novels, for example, or like we were talking about Vampire Survivors, kind of games like that where it's just sort of like coffee break stuff. And people who like play things like Baldur's Gate, where it's kind of an RPG and you can play it like as a hardcore strategy game if you want, or you can just sort of sit back and enjoy the vampire relationships and the bear sex. And that brought in a lot of female gamers, for example, like a massive amount of female gamers like that kind of stuff. And I think that, so this is one of the reasons why I was keen to distinguish between, kind of gamers, like kind of hardcore gamers who see gaming as an active pastime where they are willing to learn, and they like a little bit of frustration, gentle frustration, because what I mean by that is they like to be challenged on their skills. Then they will go back and they will actually practice a game. Like Mark will know what I'm talking about here. Like, you play a bullet hell.
Yeah,
and
I'm definitely on a very strong side of this spectrum.
How many people would you think would go like play a bullet hell for the first time, get their ass absolutely kicked on it, and then go back and go, God, I enjoyed losing then. I really want to get better at this game. I think that's a small percentage of people now.
No, I don't think it's small at all.
I think it's quite small.
I think it's like if you look at it as a sort of like there's a certain bell curve to this, right? So like the bullet hell example is like way on that one end because it is. The bullet hell population is very small. I mean, you can like just track this almost like literally by numbers, how many people are into bullet hell. It's like, by my estimation, about 10 to 15,000, maybe, that I'm aware of. Yeah. Like, there's a certain population of that size. And then, like you said, there's a lot of games, I've been thinking about this a lot, the types of games you're talking about, where something like Animal Crossing, for example, or Harvest Moon has some more gameplay elements, but Animal Crossing, for example, like these types of games I've always struggled to sort of analyze, because they're not trying to do something like an arcade game is trying to do. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think there's a certain style of, I've been thinking about it. I think it's a certain style of game design that's like gameplay as aesthetic rather than gameplay as like challenge. And so like if you look at games like Animal Crossing, and like the games you mentioned, like a lot of female gamers like certain types of games like this, and I think it's because they have a very strong aesthetic sense that a lot of like more challenge-based games sometimes don't have. Like even down to like the way the menus look, everything is just very aesthetic, and everything just it's all about like feel. Like everything just feels nice and feels like, ooh, it's all like, it's an interesting branch of game design, but it is quite a bit different. That's for sure.
I spent a fair amount of time looking at this, largely with my coworker. And if you look at, so in the Western market, there's not a ton of like very female-centered video games. But if you look in the Eastern market, there's a lot. And there's differences. You don't make, I think there's this is another reason I think Western game studios are failing, is they've got a lot of great female talent they're bringing in, and they're probably getting feedback from them, which is great, but they're trying to make male video games for women.
Yeah.
And that doesn't
I agree.
work.
I think you're right.
It doesn't work. Women want a different kind of game for the most part. Now, there's, it's non-binary. There's people that are in between, but for the most part, when you look at like women and now it's a different culture, but like in the East, they have different things they want. So, and you can see this. I think the best example I can give for this is actually from Star Wars. When Star Wars came out, and you had Rey, who was this like whiz kid, good at everything. You know, first time she gets in the Falcon, she's like zipping around. You know, just is the best at everything all the time. I liked the character Rey. I thought, you know, it was well acted. Everything. People hated her. I didn't fully understand it, but then I was like listening to try to understand what people didn't like about it. And it really, really, really bothered a lot of people that there was no challenge and that she was kind of always
easy
good.
Mode. Yeah, she was playing an easy mode.
A huge part of the old Star Wars movies was like Luke training, Luke being bad at stuff. He was like trying to raise the thing out and he couldn't do it. And, you know, so a huge thing I think for men is this idea that you like grind through, you learn, you study, you practice, you suffer, and you come out on the other end. And that's like a huge part of the male experience. It's like if you look at war, if you look at
Dragon Ball Z
boot camp.
I was about to say Dragon Ball. That's
the
reason why Dragon Ball is so popular everywhere. As soon as Dragon Ball enters a culture, all the men immediately go, "Oh my god, Goku's so cool!"
Because I think it's because it's what Dragon Ball has that's very special is it doesn't just have like power; it has suffering. I think that's why people connect with it because people, they get powerful and everything, but they just suffer, you know, to get there. You see Goku just been like, oh, you know, and you're like, holy. And I was, this isn't fully connected to gaming, but it's kind of related. That I was listening to someone talking about writing and writing characters, and he was saying, like a great writer at some point, I can't remember where, but he was saying like one of the main ways to create connection and empathy with a character is actually make that character suffer. Now I was thinking that of like with Guts from Berserk, like why do people love Guts from Berserk? Because he could be a stereotypical lame character, but Guts just suffers so much. You're like, okay, this guy rules. You know, you instantly create a connection with him because of what he has to go through. I think Dragon Ball Z has that as well. And I think you're right. That is something we were looking for. And even within like game design, you know, you don't want to just play the game and just power through it first try. You may feel like you want that, but you actually want to suffer. You want the game to like beat you a little bit so that when you get to the end, you're like, okay, that meant something when you get to the end of it.
Yeah.
So for example, whenever
that's how you learn. If you didn't suffer I think men subconsciously know if you don't suffer, you didn't learn. And when you did learn, that's your agency in making the thing happen. That's how you know the thing that happened, that was actually you. Because I suffered, I learned, and then I overcame it. Sorry,
I know that's one of the main appeals I have with games. Like, why do I... Like, I have a lot of personality traits that'd be like, why am I so into games? Like, why aren't I, you know... I love lots of other types of art and media, so why am I coming back to games? And I do think that's one reason for it. It's like games have a particular way to make me suffer and make me feel like I'm going through something and there's something on the end of it that is a little bit hard to find in other forms of media, even really well done other forms of media. So I think that is a very special aspect of game design is difficulty, suffering, meaning, you know.
And learning and just overcoming challenges. Like, it's funny, whenever my missus and I we want to play a game together, and I will always err towards upping the difficulty, right? So I'll be like, let's play it on hard, and she'll be like, oh, I don't want to play it on hard. Now I'm not saying that she's a, you know, representative of all women, because that's not true. But I think I think it's fair to generalize that I think women do play games for probably different reasons than men do in general. And not everyone, like, you know.
But you know what I think that male games could learn from female games, because I've been thinking about this a lot, is like the types of game, like you can tell certain games that, like Animal Crossing is one, but like The Sims is another, where they have a certain amount of aesthetic sense that I even noticed this with like other like YouTubers, where like if you look at female YouTubers, even ones that aren't that popular, they're almost always way better edited than male YouTubers almost every single time. Like down to the way like little pop-ups come up and like they just have a more aesthetic sense in a lot of ways. Yeah. And I do think actually a lot of like mainstream games could really learn something from that. Is like, oh wow, like upping, because look at a lot of our mainstream, especially UI design. UI design now is just like function, function, function. We lose that aesthetic sense. You look at the UI of Guilty Gear XX, and it's like, oh, it's so cool. It's so awesome.
Yeah.
All their games had these really aesthetic UIs and stuff. And so, yeah, that is something that of that type of design. I think that's very important. That's really cool.
It's arguable in like strategy gaming that we are starting to get more of those elements of games design kind of creeping in. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, so there are games that are very sort of like simulation based, where a lot of the pleasure that you get from it is like, you zoom in on this town or something, or like a planet, and you get to see like some stuff that the game's generated that you don't have direct control over, and you're like, oh, that was cool. I didn't know it did that. And I think that's part of the same kind of fun that you'd get from playing a game like Animal Crossing, where it's like, oh, what's the owl doing today? And you go and talk to the owl, and it tells you stuff. Mm-hmm. But just quick aside, they did
like some naturalism, like you're saying with Souls. I think that's one reason why Souls can attract across lots of different demographics, because it has kind of a lot of the elements that cross both, where you want suffering, you want challenge, it's got that. But if you want that sort of aesthetic experience, it also has that as well. I think that's something it's really good at balancing.
That's what kept me playing Dark Souls, actually, was that kind of storytelling of show don't tell. I really like that about Dark Souls games. I think they do that perfectly. I'm very, I like storytelling in games, providing it's not too wordy. Because if I'm going to read a book, I might as well read a book. You know what I mean? But like Dark Souls did that really, really well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's this Lucy's bringing up here?
Let me see if I can put it in. I'll try to put it in.
You know what's a fun cross of these two styles that I really love is Pikmin. I feel like Pikmin is like the perfect fusion. The first one is like a perfect fusion of like cute aesthetic and then also really challenging. It's such a cool game. It's one of my favorite Nintendo games, and of course they ruined it in the subsequent Pikmin games, because they're like, all right, we'll keep the cute and the fun, but we'll get rid of the challenge. So Pikmin 1 is the only one that actually, because of the timer and the daytime limit.
I know the game, man. I haven't played it. The one that comes to my mind for that is, did you ever have a Dreamcast? Did you have a Sega Dreamcast? Yeah. So do you remember the game Choo Choo Rocket? That was kind of cute, but also brutally difficult.
Like shoot 'em ups, like Fantasy Zone. Have you ever played Fantasy Zone? That's another really fun one.
Yeah, way back though. That's an old arcade game, isn't it?
Yes,
Fantasy Zone,
it's a Sega game. Yeah, it's a Sega game, your ship is like this little character. A fun fact: Opa Opa, the name of the ship, was Sega's first mascot before Sonic. Before Sonic, their mascot was Opa Opa. And my favorite part is, like, this is an aesthetic thing, right? So this isn't functional. It has no meaning on game design. But when the ship gets down to the ground, little feet pop out, and it like runs around on the ground with its little feet. Like, these little aesthetic touches, I think, really go a long way and add a lot of personality.
It's funny you say that, actually, because Sega's other big game in the 80s was Space Harrier, which is a favorite of mine. I love that game.
Yeah.
And it says "Welcome to the Fantasy Zone" as you. That's the first thing. It's like it was digitized speech in the game.
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder if that was something to do with it. Yeah.
Sega had their own little arcade
kind
universe.
Of interesting. This is a kind of interesting chart here. It's got all the video games with like how popular they were, like average age of play on the up down, and then whether it was played by men or women on the XY. I mean on the x-axis. So like these are more female oriented games, and a lot of I think this was made by like a Japanese person, because a lot of these are. But
can you read some of them out for the audience? Yeah.
Hello Kitty is over here.
Very aesthetic.
Snoopy.
Very aesthetic.
It's got some shows on here too. Eating shows, musicals and operas. And then this is like, there's a lot of the female games that are actually really popular in the East. I don't know the names of, so I wouldn't like know the popular one to read out over here. But in the middle, there's like, let's see. Like Final Fantasy is pretty close to the middle.
Final Fantasy is very aesthetic. Very aesthetic.
Idolmaster, I don't know that. Pokemon's pretty close to the middle.
Yep. Yep. Cute.
And Pokemon's like super easy too. Yeah. And then, all the way over here you have like Yu-Gi-Oh, which,
boy stuff.
It's kind of funny because like they're similar. Like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon aren't that different, but they're very different in terms of who they target.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh is definitely more like for boys in terms of its aesthetic presentation. I like Yu-Gi-Oh, so I'm a boy and I like it. So Blue Eyes White Dragon rules, dude.
But you can make a game that both genders would like.
Yeah.
But
yes.
I think the thing is that there's like very strong gender preferences. It's not like, oh, women like Diet Coke 60% and men like Coke Zero like 60%. You know, or like it's not like a small difference. It's like a huge difference. And, and I think like one of the things that we're getting kind of off topic here, but it's kind of fun. One of the things, if you look at like Clueless, the original Clueless movie, there's like a scene in it where she pulls up her computer and she like picks out the outfit and it like switches through different things and then it like shows her in the outfit. This was like an inspiration, a phenomenon among young girls and stuff who watched that. They were like, "Oh my god!" Like at the time. Now it's like whatever. I can.
Oh well, the only game
stuff on there
my wife will play be like dedicated and serious is Sims. I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
that is the game. Like
which one? Sorry?
And
dress
it's
up,
funny.
Do a job.
Sims, whatever the not the latest Sims, but you know the classic-ish era Sims. God knows
Sims
what.
3,
Sims 4?
Mm-hmm.
Sims 4,
Sims
Sims 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But what's funny is, she can, like we're saying, in that ecosystem, she can get real hardcore about it and be like making like her house designs are like really intricate. Like there is a lot of engagement with it and a lot of like investment, but it's a different style. That's why I think it's more aesthetic. It's like an aesthetic exercise rather than like that suffering challenge, beat me to death exercise.
It's the relationships as well. Women love relationships in games like that. My missus loved Baldur's Gate, and she immediately installed all the mods that allowed you to kind of like romance any NPC in the game, and that kind of stuff.
And wasn't that a big thing in Fire Emblem too? When they brought that in, that really brought in a female user base. When they brought in the relationships of Fire Emblem.
Yeah. I liked Fire Emblem actually. Fire Emblem Three Houses. I really enjoyed that.
I think the thing is. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, Lucy, please. I was just.
So if you were a guy and you're thinking, let's make a dress-up game, you would think like, oh, let's make it where you go out in a field and you collect cotton, and then you have a machine and you refine the cotton down into a fabric, and then you cut out all the little things.
And you have to protect your fabric from robbers. You have to fight off the robbers.
Fabric from robbers, right? And then you get to put it on, and it's like, great, now we make the next thing. And if you make a game for women, they want to dress up in a lot of things. They don't want it to be hard. They want to be like, oh, like let's try this on. How do I look? No, I don't like it. Let's do the next one. Oh, I like this one better. Let's keep this. Let's try a different bottom. You know, like it's a totally. But for men, like, wait, you're going to give me all the weapons at the beginning, and I just try them all on and see which one I like? Like that's not. That just ruins. It's like. It
you know what's interesting is it seems like with like female-oriented games, there is a lot of developer investment on the art in sort of design aspect of like interaction with the game. Like that is makes or breaks it. That makes or breaks your game. Like the art, the interaction, how the feel. Like feel is so important. Where male-centric games, you know, I'm not sensitive to that stuff. A lot of that stuff goes over my head anyway. And then it's just like, the challenge, the suffering, the goal. What's the goal? You know, I sit down, I'm like, what's the goal? Like within 3 seconds. You know,
what
am I trying to achieve now?
For women, it was like Ichi or Ochi or something. What was the AI game? Where it's like you could romance people, but it like actually had AI in it. And
I don't know.
Okay, let me see if I can pull it up on Steam somewhere.
Well, I think one thing that we can tie this into, for example, in strategy games, I feel that there's in recent times there's very much an emphasis now on aesthetic stuff over kind of like complexity of game mechanics. So for example, like Lucid and I were talking about a game recently called Age of Wonders 4, where they've started to introduce a lot of this kind of more, you know, female oriented stuff. Like, you know, at the start of the game, you have to spend time making your character look cool, and you know, you're picking the race of your, you know,
character customization,
really extensive character customization. Then they've got the meta game progression. So after you finished your 12-hour campaign or whatever, then they're like, oh, we want you to play again. So you have this, you know, you score these points, and then you accumulate points to unlock more abilities and stuff for the game. So they've kind of put in this kind of I don't like it. I really prefer my strategy games to be completely devoid of meta progression, to be honest, because I just think that if you're going to spend 20 hours playing a campaign of a long strategy game, the last thing I want to do is play it straight over again, like, after I've played. But that's kind of what they're trying to do. Like, and so I think that I'm often at loggerheads with the rest of the 4X community on this. They think I'm just a bit of an old man and, old man shouting at cloud. But I really feel like over reliance on aesthetic games design, and sort of painting that picture and trying to attract in people who are more into the sort of, oh, look at what that's doing. Like, what's the owl in Animal Crossing saying today? That kind of stuff. Or, I remember when I played Sims and I made like the Bin Laden family for a laugh or something, and I was laughing because Osama Bin Laden was chatting up the next door neighbor's 14-year-old girlfriend or something, or 14-year-old daughter, and I was just like, I can't play this game anymore. Like, this is too mental. And
what have you done? Battle mode.
Yeah, what have you done? Yeah, like, but
what have you unleashed?
It was just. Yeah, but it was hilarious, and I was like, but it's like TV, and but that stuff I'm starting to see it more and more in kind of what I would consider to be, like tactics games and strategy games, very much about aesthetics, how your characters look. Games don't do well now unless they've got extensive character customization or that kind of thing, and most of it's superfluous.
It's true they don't do well unless they do it.
I think. I mean, I think one of the reasons why Age of Wonders 4 did so well is because it has got this incredibly in-depth and detailed character and faction customization stuff. But as you and I've spoken about, I feel that takes away from some of the complexity of the game, because in order to make that shit work, they've had to reduce the complexity of the game in many ways in order to, to kind of to make that. Oh well, you can have dwarves that are like as strong as orcs and halflings that are, like can leap over buildings and stuff, and it's just like, so it not only does it make the game kind of hard to read now, but it's also they've got to then homogenize a lot of the game mechanics in order to make that crap fit. So this is what I mean about how I'm mostly concerned about how this stuff affects the games design. Like, how does it affect the games that we actually play? Because I think it's great that people have got games. There's games for men, for women, or for whatever people who like those style of games. I think we should have all the games that we can have. If people want to play games, that's great. But when certain design aesthetics or design principles start to kind of damage games, in my opinion, like, so the stuff that I like when it's difficult to find, like an engaging strategy game that doesn't drag you through half an hour's worth of character customization at the start. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
And that's where I start. Like, Mark's talked about this. You play, like, I've got this game that came out. It's like a platform game, like a retro platform game. And this is common across modern retro style platform games now, where they kind of look like old games. Like, it looks a bit like Castlevania. But then you play it, and half the game, it doesn't even come close to Castlevania's difficulty, for example. And you might get, like, Shovel Knight's a good example of this. Shovel Knight's quite a fun game, but it's not really difficult, and you can really walk through easy. Like the first.
It's crazy easy.
The first half of the game, or maybe the first 2/3 of the game, really without batting an eyelid. If you've got some legacy skill, if you're a kid or whatever, then fine. It's probably challenging for a child, but it's only really the very last stage where people start to, I've got to practice this. And I think that I noticed this with this Abathur game as well. Very, very long levels with very low level challenge for like 2 hours of the gameplay, and I'm like, have I really got to play for 2-3 hours to get to a bit where where I'm being challenged? Like,
Steam
not everybody wants.
You don't.
They're like,
exactly.
We are not going to do anything that may cause a refund in 2 hours.
I do wonder.
The 2 hour window is just a warm up.
No, not everybody wants Ghosts and Goblins.
Like, I don't think people like it. I think people, if it's no challenge, if it's like, what is the game here? Like, anytime. So the game we're making, anytime a game gets made that's sort of close to it, we'll usually play it.
Yeah,
sure. And that means I'm playing a lot of indie games that I would not normally buy, and a lot of them suck. Like, they're so boring. Like, I would say I'm so much more turned off if I start up a game and it's like, oh, do this, and they like show me how to do it, and then I do it, and then it's like that's all I do for the rest of the game, and I just win. Like, it's the most boring, horrible experience. It's like, where's the decision I'm supposed to make? Where's the conflict of choices? Where's the learning? It's and there's so many games like that. So I think I think the bigger risk is if people aren't experiencing like consequence of decision, if it's like, oh, do this or this, it doesn't matter, they're both fine, you just go through and you hit a random button like a monkey. Like, people don't like this. I don't think.
I don't like it. Like,
yeah, I think it takes more. It takes more sort of awareness of the design to start critiquing something that's lacking challenge versus the people who within like 5 seconds they die. They're like, this is a problem. Whereas like you have to have a certain amount of legacy skill and experience and literacy and design to be like, I just played Shovel Knight for 30 minutes and didn't die one time. Something's wrong here. Versus, but also I was thinking a lot of this with indie games, right? And I think some of it may come down to the fact that games now are a little too self-aware of themselves versus games in the past where like now with Steam, with like how instant feedback can be between developer and player, how instant everything can connect together. Back in the day, you made the game in your bubble as the developer, and everyone on staff's like, yeah, we think this is about right. And then you send it off into the world, and I rent it from Blockbuster, and it's like super Ghosts and Goblins. I'm like, oh my god, Capcom. But then you have that time with just you in the game to kind of, all right, I can't message anyone about this. I can't do anything about this. There was more of that like window of just you and the game together, and you had to sort of be a bit more like you had to conform to the game a bit more. Whereas now you download the game, you play Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection for an hour. You're like, I died 10,000 times in the first minute. Refund, or if not even refund, just like even if you don't give it a negative review, you just type in your review, this was ridiculous or something. I feel like that could also be a factor to this, where since there's so much more of an immediate connection between developer and player now, developers are a little bit more scared to just beat you over the head.
Consider how old the games were made as well. Like, I mean, I've been playing a really old game from my childhood called Manic Miner. It's one of the very first platform games on the ZX Spectrum, and it was made by a 17-year-old kid at the time, basically called Matthew Smith. And he was just 17 years old, made this game in his bedroom, released it, and it was in 1982. This is before Super Mario, and it went on to become the biggest selling kind of game in the UK. And so he if you watch, there's an interview where it's a notoriously difficult game. It's really, really hard. Even like I'm quite good at games, but like if you go to try to win Manic Miner, you don't get any credits. You only get like a couple of lives, and you get a few extra lives later on. And there's 20 screens, and they're just increasingly
ahead
hard.
Of its time.
It's way ahead of its time. But if you consider the developer was a kid himself, and he was making a game what he thought would be fun for other people, right? Before he had really very much, like, there were other games. I think there was Atari systems, but that he was kind of basing his game on, but very few. There was arcades as well, but there weren't that many platform games. Like I said, it was way before Super Mario. And he said it really interestingly in this interview. He was like, this guy was playing it along with him, and he kept dying on the first screen. He goes, I made the first screen deliberately quite difficult because I wanted new players to be able to experience some of the frustration of the game without you having to get good at it first. And that fucking blew my mind. Like that statement blew my mind. I wanted people to be able to experience how difficult it was without having to get good at the game first. So this level teaches you how to play the game. It's pretty much everything in the game is in this first stage, and it's quite tricky. And once you get past
vertical slice, as you'd call it nowadays.
Yes, right. And that's literally what it was as well. The first few screens, he was making them so that he could test the limits of the jump engine, to how far can you jump, and it was one of those pixel perfect games where you got to really, literally, you've got to get on the right pixel to make certain jumps and stuff. Now that game's design fallen out of favor, but it does make me think that immediate connect, like what you were saying about the connection between developers and players now is really, really close. Whereas in those days, we didn't have that. There was no internet. And this guy was literally just making this game hoping that it would work. He wasn't really even playtesting it with people, I don't think. So it was a very, very different design paradigm. And if you consider something like, you're talking about Ghosts and Goblins, another notoriously difficult game. Like that remake that came out recently, I must have played for like maybe a week before I got off the first stage. It's that fucking
Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection,
And I'm no slouch at games. Like, I'm not bad at games. And that was hard for me. That was really difficult. And so I think that kind of level of extreme difficulty that came from the 80s, not only was it partly tied towards arcade games
why,
philosophy, but
just a little side topic on Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, why it still retains that classic style. It's because it was the original old developer guy making it.
Yeah.
He's just like,
Right.
I'm just doing my thing.
Yep.
So yeah, if you had like a younger, what's interesting though is whenever like a classic game is coming out, I always instantly look up how old are these developers, and like the older they are, I'm like, all right, it's kind of probably be more classic, because like a younger studio, like you hand them Ghosts and Goblins, you're like, guys, okay, do it. Then going back to Lucid's point, they're like, all right, well, we learned in game design school that you want to slowly have a slightly on-ramp of difficulty. So we're going to have the first 5 stages slowly on-ramp, versus the classic Ghosts and Goblins guy. Yeah, he kills you within 30 seconds.
Over and over again. Yeah. I mean,
over and over again.
Not everybody wants that level.
I think there's a balance, because I think
sure.
If I have to do pixel perfect jumps and that's the lesson you want me to learn in the first stage, I'm going to quit the game immediately. That's not something I'm interested in doing.
That doesn't wash anymore in games design, really.
Maybe if it was a platformer and that was the last level and I'd been doing it and been getting better and better, maybe you could try to pull that shit on me in the last level and I'd be like, okay, I'm committed. I'm going to learn this shit. But yeah. So I think there's a thing with like ramping up, but I think there's this idea that developers have too of like, oh, let's coddle you. Let's really slowly like maybe you don't have many mechanics in your game. Maybe you have 5 and you're like, the first 2 hours are going to be the first mechanic, and the next 2 hours are going to be the next mechanic, and the next 2 hours are going to be the mechanic after that. Like, that's going to be boring as hell. Like, why don't you give me an interesting puzzle, and then I solve it, and then you give me an interesting another little thing to do, and then you introduce this whole new mechanic I didn't know, and then there's interesting things to do. And, like, you keep that going, that's going to be fun, but that should also be difficult and exciting. So,
well, I was thinking about this a lot with game design, because we treat, and in school, I think they do this the same. They treat game design as like this uniform process without accounting for like legacy skill, literacy of the type of game. Like the funny thing is when that, I can't remember the game you're talking about, but the computer game that the 17-year-old kid made back when that came out. Yeah, Mike Miner.
Manic Miner.
Oh, Manic Miner. Okay.
Yes.
Is it on Steam?
No, it's you can probably play it in a browser window though. In fact, you can if you just.
Okay.
It's so very basic.
So during that era, platformers were kind of newer. Legacy skill in the platformer genre is probably a little bit newer. So that was probably like, whoa, dude. But these days, if you were aiming at a legacy skilled audience, like those guys who play Super Mario Kaizo ROM hacks with their eyes closed and stuff.
Yeah.
You could have it, and it be legit that the very first screen, pixel perfect jumps, go playa. But that would be like you're accounting for who you're aiming the game at. You're accounting for their legacy skill. You're accounting for all these different factors. But I think what happens is now all games are treated and designed, at least in the scale we're talking about, like bigger games, as if legacy skill doesn't exist. So then they follow this formula of, right, teach the player to jump over something. Okay, you learned how to jump over something. Teach the player to, like, all these basics. But the problem is if it's a game that's aiming at like a middle audience, even a middle core audience are like, dude, I've played Mario Brothers 10,000 hours. I know how to do this stuff. Versus like when I give feedback with games, it's like if your game has something kind of unique and unusual or something that's not part of the legacy skill, then these types of designs start to make sense again. It's like there's this mechanic that is, you've not encountered this shit before. So let's kind of slowly introduce you to this, versus if it's something you've done 10,000 times in 10,000 other games, maybe you don't need to introduce that, right? We don't need to learn how to jump over a pipe anymore. We got it. So that would be my critique of Shovel Knight, is like it's great if you are a child and you've never played games before, because that's kind of how it's designed. It's like designed for a kid who's never played a platformer before. So that's the audience that would work for that. But if you're aiming at an audience of nostalgic retro players, we know how to do all this. Like, no problem.
Yeah.
Well, one good, if you look at, so there's a really interesting homebrew scene for old consoles. And I've been really eating some of this stuff up recently. Like, people are still making games for the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis. For the NES. And I've been if you look at some of those games that are being made, they are made for the hardcore community. Generally speaking, they're often more difficult. They're usually like trying to show off some technical aspect that they've mastered, with regards to with the hardware, because they're so much better with the hardware now. I mean, Manic Miner was made for the ZX Spectrum. People are still making ZX Spectrum games, even though it's a really, really difficult platform to make good games for because it's so limited. And so if you go and look at those games and who they're designed for, it's kind of an interesting. It's an interesting.
I was into this back in the day with Super Metroid because I was really into Super Metroid speedrunning and Super Metroid ROM hacking and playing ROM hacks. And one of my favorite Super Metroid ROM hacks is upside down Super Metroid. So the entire every room is upside down. And so if you're a kid, if you're an 8-year-old kid playing Super Metroid, this is unplayable nonsense. But if you've played Super Metroid 10,000 times, you've mastered the mechanics. You've mastered some of the mechanics that maybe not even fully intended to exist, like speedballing, all of these types of things, bomb jumping, all of these sort of very obscure, more hardcore mechanics. You can play Super Metroid upside down, and it's super interesting, and it's really interesting.
Consider when Super Mario Brothers took the world by storm, right? Well, it took Japan by storm, and then very quickly afterwards on the Famicom Disk System, they released Super Mario Brothers 2.
Yes,
now this is a completely different game. I played this back in the day because I had a Japanese friend who had a Famicom, and so I didn't. He always used to go, look at the American version of Super Mario Brothers 2. It's just some totally different game. Blah blah blah.
Doki Doki Panic.
Snooty, but, yeah, right. It was a remake of Doki Doki Panic, but the original Super Mario Brothers 2. Have you ever tried playing that?
Oh, hell yeah! It's on Super Mario. Yeah, it's on the Super Mario All Stars Lost Levels.
All Stars, yes. That was the first time it came to the West.
Many hours as a child battling the Lost Levels.
Now that's a difficult game. Now, I wonder why. Say Nintendo made the decision not to bring that game over to the West, and instead they remade this new. This is the one that Luce is looking at. That is not the original Super Mario Brothers 2. The original Super Mario Brothers 2 is like a really, really difficult version of like original Super Mario Bros. It's all the same graphic assets, same music. It's got things like poison mushroom. Right at the start of the game, on the very first level, there's an infinite. There's a kind of trick you can do to get like 99 lives, or like a bunch of lives, basically by.
I remember this.
Trap a tortoise shell. You trap a tortoise shell, and then you can if you jump at the right moment. It's really hard to do. My Japanese mate could do it, and then you could just spam out a bunch of lives. But bloody hell, you needed them, even with like dozens of lives you got from this trick. Even getting past the first world was crazy. Now, selling that kind of level of difficulty to people is really, really hard. Okay, like Super Meat Boy did pretty well, and that's quite a difficult game. But I think the difficulty of Super Meat Boy or something really kind of ramped up quite gradually. Super Mario Brothers 2,
also Super Meat Boy had those like really generous checkpoints, didn't it? If I remember correctly, like it's
got generous mechanics as well.
Yeah, like you get through one screen, it's like you're good. You're good player.
Yeah.
It has that checkpoint. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Whereas like Super Mario Brothers 2, you get 3 lives. Yeah. And then you if you die, you go if you have to use a continue, you go right back to the start of the world. So even if you got to the 4th stage, Bowser's Castle or whatever, it just yeets you straight back to the start. So and I think that those kind of that kind of old school difficulties are hard sell for a lot of people. Whereas I eat that shit up. I love it. I really.
What's funny is you can track this with Super Mario Bros. 1 ports. It's really funny. So I believe the first version of Super Mario Bros., the NES port, has full permadeath. As if when you game over, you go all the way back to the beginning of the game. And then in All Stars, it has like level-based or land-based permadeath. So if you die in All Stars of Super Mario Bros. 1, you go back to land, the beginning of the land, but you don't full reset back. And I think it's Super Mario Bros. Deluxe on the Game Boy Color. Now I think it comes down to level checkpoints. So you go from full game, land, level. It's just kind of a funny little progression of
that's interesting.
Difficulty has adjusted over time, like checkpoints and how frequently.
Because I think a lot of people, they don't want to be like so active. Like I see that as a really active engagement game, right? A game where you are yeeted back to the start. Like I've been playing Castlevania 3, right? That's another Japanese difficult game. Well, actually, the American version, but that's another difficult game. And using save states, you can get good at games like that, right? You can get to Dracula at the end, and you can save a save state and then practice the boss. But still, to do a 1cc of that game, pretty tough, even if you go the like standard route, right? And I think that that's a very active style of gaming, and I think that this is the point I was trying to make at the start, that I think the vast majority of gamers, and Lucid might disagree with me here, but I think the vast majority of gamers are not on that level of wanting to practice games. Yeah, mostly. I think people like the challenge of overcoming challenges. I completely agree with that. They like the the feeling of the Dragon Ball Z thing of being beaten down and getting better. But I think that to take that next step to where you will actively choose a very difficult game like Ghosts and Goblins and fail hundreds of times before you get anywhere, and to practice,
that's a whole other class of players.
To take saves, like playing Dodonpachi, like you're taking save states to practice specific sections of a game because it's that damn hard that it's very hard to get to the end. That Getting Over It game, that somebody was talking to me about this. I've not played this, but apparently this is incredibly hard as well.
This is basically the game you're describing. This is somebody made a new game, and it's just like that.
Oh, this is the one where you climb, and then if you mess up, you like fall back down. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah. Have you played this? Apparently, it's very good.
Okay, so Bog talks to me about this all the time
by a different level.
It has this hilarious developer commentary.
Yeah, the developer commentary is funny. The controls are frustrating, and then when you die, you go back to the beginning, and you have to do all this stupid shit again.
Me and Bog were talking about this. The fact that the game, because we're talking about a lot of things that would help players connect with this style of design, is sort of contextualizing the failure in a way that the game knows that you're failing and is commenting on your failing. Rather than, because I think what happens a lot, especially with kind of the modern taste of game design, is if you're failing a lot and resetting a lot of people, they don't immediately go, oh, this is a skill-based problem, I need to learn. Some of them may go, oh, they didn't balance the game. This is not correctly designed. They didn't design this correctly. This is actually a flaw in the game design. But a way to overcome that, I think Souls did a pretty good job with this, with the way it's like you died and everything. But I think Getting Over It is like, ooh, it's kind of beautiful, where the commentary is like kind of acknowledging and like, come on, man. And like, I think if you can contextualize this to the players more, they accept it more. Like, you let the player know that you, as the developer, know that they're failing and that what they're doing is actually really hard. So ironically, the more the game exactly.
Like the meta progression we're going,
the more the game acknowledges that it knows that you're struggling, the more the players will accept that this is supposed to be happening. Versus if the game's completely just, like, think of like a really famously like kind of janky NES game or something like that. It's hard to know, is the developer meaning for this to happen? Like Battletoads, for example. It's like, is this supposed to be occurring, or is this an oversight in design, or maybe somewhere in the middle?
So I think like people have different preferences for resets. Not like there's a reason this game was popular. It's because it's super fucking it's comically frustrating. Like it's so frustrating that you want to pull your hair out, but it gives you such strong feelings about frustration. You're like, wow, there's a lot of feelings inside here, you know?
And the game's commenting on it. I think that's what really helps it too.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think people, I think there's a mix of things. I think if you, I think probably like if you want to reach a broad audience, you probably do want some ramp up, and different people have different levels of experience they're coming into, so that ramp is going to be hard to nail, and you might need 2 or 3 different ramps, but or maybe more. But but people, like, I think in general, just having like lots of really interesting content with challenge, and if you can lose, if it's pretty easy to lose, like if you don't know what you're doing, you should lose. I think if you're making a game and you want men as a big part of your target audience, and you want the men, like the middle part of the bell curve for men that care about those things, there's others that don't, then like you should be able to lose pretty easily. But if you know what you're doing, then you shouldn't. And then you're like, well, how do we make a game like that? Because we make the game, we teach you the thing, and then you do it, but then you win from there on out. No, you need a lot of different challenges. And that's, like as we were talking about, it's hard, you know?
Yeah, so, I think one issue that a lot of modern games fall into that I don't know if this is actually intended. I think if this is actually something that's happening that I don't think developers are fully thinking about too much, but there's this real focus on gameplay loops and emphasizing
I've been talking
gameplay
about
loops.
this.
Yeah, and like how important gameplay loops are. And I don't think they're actually intending to create this problem, but what happens a lot is if you really focus on a gameplay loop and then you really focus on like emphasizing that loop as much as possible, what can happen a lot is you accidentally create a system that feeds itself too much and reinforces itself too much. So then once you know the gameplay loop, the game just instantly like solves itself because it's like everything you do feeds back into that loop. I was watching. This is a strategy example that you guys might appreciate because I was watching a ASL and they were talking about in Brood War. It has a kind of an interesting counter example to this because yes, you gain more minerals, you build more units. The units then gain, then the worker units go out and get more minerals, and it feeds itself. But then the counterpoint to that in Brood War is the limitation of how much you can do at once. Like, yes, you're creating more things, but then you have to juggle all of these things. And then as a human being, just your limitation of trying to get this guy over here, move him, and then the fact that you can't select everything, you can't hotkey everything, you got to juggle. So it's a way the game creates a really natural counterbalance to its gameplay loop, because of the limitation of how many things you can control at once and how much it requires you to juggle.
Yeah.
And I think if modern games, they've got the gameplay loop, but they forgot the second part of you need something to counter it, to limit it. Yeah. So that so that it doesn't just feed itself constantly.
I think another way to look at it too is I think if you're developing a game, there's like menus and stuff you're going to be in a lot, or there's things you do over and over again. Like you go to this level, then you go to that level. So the loop is you go to a level. But I think some of this is like, it's brain rot because you get thinking, oh, well, I just have to make levels. And we just give you more things as you go from level to level. And you stop thinking of it in terms of like mechanics and challenges. You just think, it's content. Like, like, oh, we're having this level, it looks like this, and then when we're done we go to this level, it looks like this, and we give you this character, it looks like this, and on this level you did 10 damage and the enemies had 10 health, but on this other level we give you this new item and now you do 20 damage and the enemies have 20 health. And the level after that, you'll never guess it, but we're going to give you this even newer weapon. It's really shiny. It does 30 damage. And then it's have 30 health.
Have 30 health.
But people are going to get bored.
Yeah.
Loop-based game design.
This actually literally happened in the new Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
In the new Final Fantasy 16, it's hilarious, my like relationship with that game, because when it first started off, it kind of had more of a bayonet, because the whole selling point is it had more action elements, combat elements to it. And so in the very beginning, it kind of is emphasizing these things because you just have your sword and whatever. It's not the most amazing thing ever, but for a Final Fantasy game, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like it has combat and stuff. But as the game goes, the whole content thing, you're exactly right. Because it's like, oh, here's a summoning thing. Here's another summoning thing. Oh, here's another item. Here's another item. And by the end, you're just back to an RPG because you don't need to fight anything anymore. It's like, oh, I'll just summon everything.
That's the problem with loop-based thinking, because if you break everything down into loops, the tendency is to zoom in and minimize. So loop-based games design is bad when you add it to the constant desire for minimalism, because when you mix those two things together, everything's sort of like it's like you're on this sort of like slippery slope towards automation in a lot of ways. It's really bad in strategy games. The other problem is you're not really, it doesn't, like, what does thinking about a strategy game like Civ in terms of a gameplay loop actually do? It's like, okay, well, you go out and explore, you find resources, you put a city down, you exploit the city and repeat. Well, that doesn't actually sum up Civ at all. There's a lot of long-term planning, right? This is really, I got so much pushback, by the way, in my own community for pointing this out. I was like, I think that the gameplay loop is actually ruining strategy game design, because it doesn't take into account, like, for example, we were talking about the aesthetic side of things. Like, a lot of people get a real they enjoy the feeling of building this powerful empire. That's not covered in the gameplay loop. Yeah. The other thing that's not covered in would be, for example, the like the aesthetic feelings of it. Like, oh yeah, look at building this pretty city. That might be, people might consider that as like as an accessory. But if we're using gameplay loop based thinking, as your primary design principle, and you're trying to hone down what is it that this game does, what is the player supposed to be doing, let's give them more of that. Like you say, Lucid said it perfectly, you are just churning out content, you're not thinking about the long term, like what's the player going to be thinking about the game in 30 hours, like for a strategy game. What are you going to be like, for example, do you think that the gameplay loop based thought of games design, the guy who did Ghosts and Goblins thought about that? Was he thinking,
absolutely,
oh, how are players going to be thinking about this 100 hours in, like with Dodonpachi? I think like, how are players going to be thinking about this in 100 hours? Like, how long is it going to take to practice to get good at this? I think they were. I think it's evident.
The arcade stuff is really fun because you actually have the answer to this, which you don't necessarily have with console games as much. So with like Dodonpachi and arcade-based games, they were literally in an arms race against the super players in the arcades. And so not even in a theoretical sense, they would literally bring them into the office and be like, is this hard enough? And the guy's destroying it. They're like, all right, hold on. Let me make this harder. So that's why arcade. Yeah. So like going back to Super Mario 2, there was a arcade version of Super Mario Brothers, not the, the pipe one where you knock things over, but the platformer one called Versus Super Mario Brothers. And so Super Mario Brothers 2, The Lost Levels, you can see that as an evolution of the arcade design of Mario Bros. Because arcade games are different than console games in that they needed to adapt to their highest skill players. They needed to, that's why if you go most arcade series, they literally just get harder as they go. It's because they established the template, Metal Slug 1. Then everyone gets good at Metal Slug 1. So Metal Slug 2, okay, we're going to make this harder. And then Metal Slug 3, all right, these guys are really good at Metal Slug 1 and 2. We got to make this harder. And so with arcade design, you can literally see the games in an arms race against their player base. The players are coming in, they're playing, they're play testing it, they're in the arcades, they're watching it. Whereas console-based games, they're not in an arms race against their best players. It's like the reverse. They're trying to accommodate their worst players. Like, oh, the guy who can't beat level 1 because he can't jump over that little pit, oh, we can't have that. So it's kind of a reverse of the situation. That's why Super Mario Bros, the console version versus the arcade version, is like such a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
One other thing I'd like to talk about,
sure,
shifting topics maybe a little bit, but is I think there's an idea too that, like, we're talking about challenge and difficulty, and I think in fighting games, I think this is like a shmup or whatever. It's not going to be as contentious, but in a strategy game, I think this is it's a big question, and I think it's how do you make losing fun? Because, and I'll give you an example. In Civilization, they've designed Civilization now so that it's this kumbaya. Everybody's going to make it through the whole game. We're going to march off into infinity, and whoever at the end of the game has the higher number wins.
Yeah.
And the whole game is you're sitting there watching a UI and you're like, oh, I've got 95 science, but they've got 105. And then it's like, oh, I've got 96 now. And at some point you may realize I'm not going to catch up. Like, I might lose because my number is only 101 and theirs is 110. And then you quit. That's the most boring, tedious, fucking awful way to lose a game I can imagine. Like, if you go back to old school Civ 1, do you know how you lost old school Civ 1? You had riflemen, and they had tanks, and there were 10 tanks, and they came and invaded you, and you died. And then you rage quit. That is an emotional experience.
This is something Bog and I have talked about a lot with modern games, and the difference between, one of the biggest differences between classic and modern design is that classic games punish failure by killing you. That's how failure is signified. You died. Whereas modern games, they punish failure with tedium. So they don't kill you, but they just make you be bored, you know?
Yeah.
And like, we were even talking about this with like meter-based stuff where like there were certain, I can't remember what it was, but there are certain games where like if you fail, if you just hang around and wait for your meter to recharge, then you can heal, then you can get back into it. So it's like, okay, you failed, but the punishment was you just have to wait around and then you're back in it. Versus in classic games, you fail, you just die. That's it.
Yeah.
So,
but
and that actually makes it more fun. That makes it more fun.
All those things you described, Mark, would be way more fun than what currently exists for strategy games. Like most strategy games, it's the slow heat death of the universe that's going to kill you.
Yeah. So I think one thing is
I think it's interesting because I'm a strategy game player. I play multiplayer Dominions. That does not happen in multiplayer Dominions. Like, so Dominions is a strategy game. What happens there is if you show signs of weakness, that the vultures and hyenas of the world come out, you're dead really fast. And then you die in a very gruesome way. Like, all you just have to do is you say, hey, I think I might be losing this war. Like, I'll probably be sticking around for like 15 more turns, but I'm probably going to lose. All your neighbors will be like, oh, this guy's going to die. Let's fucking eat him. And then you're dead in like a turn or two. So
yeah, it should be, I guess, like the way they should set the baseline is the baseline should be the struggle for survival, not the baseline should be the struggle for prosperity. Because the baseline for struggle for prosperity, like I said, it's boring. It's like, oh, this guy has a slightly more prosperous civilization than I do. I guess I lose. Versus, if I don't win, I will die. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you're out of the game. Yeah. Game over.
Yeah.
What is it that's caused this, do you think? Because is it like a natural extension of this whole kind of politically correct parachute game stuff that kind of came in the 90s where, you know, like at school, I remember it. We had to do these parachute games and we were told, oh, you know, we're trying to encourage people not to play sports, you know, competitive sports. We want everyone to be happy clappy and, you know, everybody wins. And the problem is with that kind of mindset is that if everybody wins, nothing's very exciting and no one ever really gets challenged, right? And like, you know, if everybody's equal, everybody's equally low. And I think that there's definitely some of that, I think, in game design a little bit.
I think in game design, I have an interesting theory on this because I've been thinking about it a lot, which is I think one of the root causes for it is that we don't view games as social as much as we used to. And so, like, for example, if you have a social-based game, like you said, you're playing T-ball or something, like, someone has to win, someone has to lose. But in video games, like, over time, that win-lose social element has sort of started to diminish. And so we look at single-player games as just this, your experience, like, you live in a little bubble by yourself. And then the game is going to tailor itself to be whatever experience you want. I brought this up with like the Doom, the Dark Ages sliders, where like the game should actually set the parameters of success and victory for you, and then you have to adjust your performance to those parameters. But now with a lot of modern game design, it's like, well, you can move the parameters however you want to move them. You want to move them here, move them there. And so it just becomes this sort of meaningless blah, where you have to define your own experience, you have to define your own balance, you have to define your own feelings. It's less of a conversation with the developer versus the developer just letting you. I swear, the ultimate game. At some point, we're going to get to a point where a game comes and it's just like, yeah, this is code. Build the game. The ultimate game design.
Yeah. So, Lucid, did you see that with the with Doom, the new Doom game? They've got difficulty sliders.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can activate them at any time, by the way. That's key.
Yeah, so you can.
It's not it's not that you just said it at the beginning. It's like at any point you can be like, let's slide this down.
Yeah,
that was in the OG Oblivion. Like we're talking Obsidian Studios,
really?
Like, or Bethesda, however you say it. Yeah, you and all the Skyrim things. I mean, I didn't play Skyrim very much. I played it for like an hour, but I know in like Morrowind or whatever. There was a slider you can move it up and down.
So it's not the thing about those games. I don't play those games, so I'm just projecting here. Is those always did feel to me more like you are supposed to be like building the game in a way. Like you're supposed to be building whatever's happening in these games. Versus in Doom, it's like no, makes the game and I play the game. Like that's more of the conversation versus, like these types of games where you're supposed to be building them and defining their own experience, and they're user made, and because isn't Skyrim and all those games like famous for how user made they are and how much user stuff there is and all that stuff. Yeah, where Doom's obviously there's like custom Doom maps and everything, but the baseline version you're buying is supposed to be id's vision, id's
I think it's great to have difficulty levels for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. And maybe a slider's too much, but you definitely shouldn't be able to fuck with the slider mid-game. That feels really
exactly.
to me.
How do you measure yourself against a game like that? That's what I would say. Like, how would I say to my mates, "Oh, I just got past level 4."
Well, you can't.
Doom,
we've actually seen this. We've actually seen what's happened with these sliders, where what happens is, whatever you do in the game, now there's a debate over what the slider should have been. So you're like, oh, I beat Ultra Nightmare mode. They're like, yeah, but you should have turned the slider to max slider. And it's like, oh, and there's like 10,000, there's like 10 different sliders. So it's like, oh, you should have this
of the game.
And then everyone's sitting around being like, well, what should be the correct slider configuration? So it's just pure chaos. It's pure like user defined experience versus like if you had a mode, Ultra Nightmare difficulty. Id decides what that is, what the parameters are, what everything is, and then you get to Ultra Nightmare difficulty, you beat it, then you have a concrete accomplishment of, okay, I did it, versus this like vague mess that we're in right now.
So just quickly, I feel like this leads us back into this thing where I feel that like, I think that, let's just say the casual game market are not that interested in this kind of social, like what we say, the social style of play where you're sort of like measuring your performance against either yourself or against other people. They're that kind of like, very active, having to practice, having to, like pit yourself against a game. It feels to me like it's falling out of favor. And, certainly games developers are not marketing unless the game, like, for example, the one that Lucid showed with the guy in the pot, unless your game's very specifically designed as a difficult game. I think that in standard games design, difficulty's falling out of favor in a big way, at least in terms of that kind of difficulty where you really do you pit yourself against it and try to improve like kind of from the start. What do you reckon to that? Do you think that's because I feel like it feels to me, at least in modern strategy games, that games are getting slower paced, much more passive, less about having to learn mechanics, like for example in strategy games, the stuff that I tend to like Dominions or Shadow Empire, they're complex games and they require you to kind of pit yourself against them a little bit to figure out how they work. And that's a very kind of specific kind of entertainment that I think not a lot of people are really into now, but that was the standard in the 90s. Like strategy games in the 90s, you got a manual and that was it. You had to figure out what it was that the developer was trying to make you do. What was it?
I have an interesting theory about this actually, because I've been finding myself getting into older PC games a little bit more recently, and it's like kind of a new exciting territory for me. I'm thinking like, old 90s PC games. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, one big difference between like why they kind of are attracting me is that older PC games, by their very nature, were hardcore because they were literally hard to run. Like you couldn't be just casual Billy and running PC games back in the day because of all of you had to deal with all of the, old school PC gaming stuff like, what graphics card do I need? How do I install this and all that kind of stuff? So I feel like that's one reason why older PC games almost always, at least from what I've seen, they all have this sort of hardcore edge to them. It's because their player base, by the nature of the platform, had to be hardcore. Versus console games, when I was 5, I had a Nintendo, right? So like you could take the cartridge, plug it in.
This stuff changed with Tomb Raider, okay? So I noticed it. Like Tomb Raider, when that came out, and that was made in my hometown, by the way, in Derby in the United Kingdom. So everyone was playing it. That was the first time that I would have been about 16, I think. Yeah, no, maybe I was 17 or 18 because I'd just started work, like legally at work. And I remember that was the first time that people, like salarymen or, like standard people just at work, like I worked in a supermarket, and the guys at the supermarket were talking about video games. Now before, if you played video games, you're either a nerd or like a loser, or, it was like a really niche thing. And games like sorry, but, I don't mean to offend anyone, but like in the like 80s and 90s, if you were playing video
Halo
games,
was like this when I was in school. Halo was
right. Halo was another step up, right? So Tomb Raider was the first time that I remember normies talking about video games, at work. Oh, well, I got past level 3 of Tomb Raider. And I was like, holy shit, these guys are playing video games? Because before it's just me and my mates. Like there was
I remember in high school, video games were lame loser shit until Halo. Literally, when Halo came out, all of a sudden the bros were like, Halo's pretty fucking cool. And they had like LAN parties. And I remember because I was always kind of a closeted gamer in school because I wanted to be cool too. So I'd always pretend like I didn't play games. And so I remember I went to the Halo LAN party and I like practiced Halo and like practiced the hardest difficulties and showed up and was like kicking people's ass and then being like, I don't know, man. I'm just really good at this. I'm just naturally talented. What are you talking about?
You
Meanwhile,
yourself.
I'm secretly because I was secretly practicing, but I was not letting them know. Yeah, I definitely know. Like Halo was a definite example of that in my school of when games became like socially kind of cool.
So like, and so Lucid, I think you might have been away, but Mark was saying how he's been getting into old PC games, and he thinks that part of the reason why those games were so hardcore, in terms of like their mechanics, partly was because the game's design wasn't so well developed at the time. But he was saying that also because just to get a game working, right, you had to be the sort of person who was into computers. You had to wrestle with sound drivers and graphics drivers and different memory management and all that kind of crap, and so I think there's something to that, but the market for games, because
I remember this really
changed.
distinctly, getting Unreal to work on my old shitty Windows 98. And the battle to get that thing to run on my computer, no matter what the game did after that point, I was like, oh, it's fine. Whatever you're doing, Unreal, it's fine. Whatever you're doing, it's fine.
Sorry, Lisa, you're going to say something.
I think most people enjoy a challenge in a way. Like, I think this idea that it's only like normies don't like a challenge or something like that. I think there's different kinds of fantasies. Like, somebody who like grows up and they're really into sports, and like a sports game's going to appeal a lot more to them than a guy that isn't really that interested in it. So like there's definitely different fantasies. Like if you didn't ever watch Lord of the Rings, you might not be interested in like a medieval fantasy game. So there's different fantasies, but I think in terms of like mechanics and challenge and the feeling that like you're actually getting good at the game, like you're learning stuff and that learning is helping you do the game better, which exists in certainly a lot of the old sports games exists in a lot of
sports games can be amazingly hardcore at times.
Yeah. So I think people like that in general. I think if you look at, I think a lot of the, like this is what, let me give an example of corporate brain rot. I'm going to struggle here to come up with the actual game, but maybe you'll be able to help me. Fortnite in some ways ruined gaming because they made so much fucking money that all the corporate executives say, hey, we need to be like Fortnite.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
We've got to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And they're like, oh, we're going to do this battleground arena. It's going to be amazing. We're going to catch on to this trend. But let's make it more accessible than Fortnite was. Like Fortnite had all these weird things in it. Let's strip it down to its core and let's do good artwork and make it appeal. Nobody fucking touched Fortnite. Fortnite crushed everybody. Like none of the new upstarts. And you look at it and you're like, oh, well, maybe it's just because Fortnite moved first. They're the first mover advantage. Probably to a degree, but not
Definitely.
Really. The other games weren't as good. Like they would go in and they'd be like, what in Fortnite do we need to take out? Like what other game do you have as building where you can build up? And I'm not a Fortnite player, right? But like the idea of Fortnite was wild. Like the idea we're going to get a first person shooter. We're going to put them in an arena and you can build. And not like you can build slowly. You can build like a skyscraper in like 20 seconds.
Yeah. I don't know where that came from. That'd be fascinating. Because obviously prior to Fortnite was PUBG, the whole battle arena thing.
Yeah.
PUBG tried to like sue them or whatever, right?
Right.
But the building element of Fortnite is really interesting. Yeah. And my brother, I watched my brother play Fortnite, and I was like, oh, I'm glad I don't play this game. But where that came from, I'm not sure. It's really interesting.
But it's complex. It's a weird, complex, fast, hard thing. And people they're like, oh, let's remove everybody in the modern, it feels like modern game developers are like removing features, trying to make it simple. And it's like they don't because this is what they learned in school. But that's not what people want. People want interesting, fun mechanics in the game. And they like to learn them and then have new things to learn while still applying the old ones. Like, that's just...
Yeah, and I think also, too, in game design school, I think people are really struggling to understand, like, scale and how complex scale is. Because if you get really down to game design, down at a really granular level, at, like, an indie level, it starts to become a little bit more predictable. But when you get to the scale of something like Fortnite, there's so many overlapping factors of what's making that popular that it's basically impossible to totally untangle and be like, this is the magic bullet right here. This is it. This is the key. Because there's, like, it could be the timing, it could be the design, it could be the timing and the design, it could be the aesthetics, it could be how it's on every platform at all times, it could be the player base itself starts to snowball and reinforce itself. There's like all of these different factors that come together all at once, rather than like very specific design things that you could just strip in, put out.
I think a way to think about it is like, if you've ever read like Nicholas Taleb and stuff, one of my authors I like, but he talks a lot about how certain types of like distributions are hard to predict. So like he talks about like black swan events, things that are going to come like once in a generation, nobody's ever prepared for them.
Yeah,
and certain things
from
book sales.
Souls would be a black swan event, I'd say.
Right. Yeah, it's like, how do you predict something like that? And I think, and so there's also this idea in indie game development that like indie games are lucky. Like you have to get lucky, or you have to market well, or you have to know the right people, or have streamers pick up your game. You know, like there's this chance or like hard thing that doesn't have to do with the game itself. And I think when you look at it is that like the right way to think about game development is like when you think about sales, it's not a linear scale you need to be thinking. You need to be thinking like a logarithmic scale. Like what factor of 10 are you going to hit? And it's then you're like, okay, well, like what's my sales going to be? You can maybe be like, you could probably look at a game, look at the quality of it, look at how well it's made, look at how appealing the fantasy is to the people who normally play those sorts of games. You look at all those things, and you could probably, and then you play it and see how it feels and how crunchy the experience is. You could probably get within, like, make a 3-bar band of, like, orders of magnitude and be like, that it's going to be between, 10 million and, like, 100 million, or it's going to be between, 100 million and a billion. Like, I think these things are essentially knowable. Now, it's probably hard to know. That's not terribly accurate if you're running a game studio. But basically, like, I think you could look at Fortnite and play it and probably be like, this is going to be a huge game. Now, you probably wouldn't be able to predict that it would be the best-selling game of all time or something like that. But
yeah, I feel like with game studios, from what I've heard, like the idea that you're going to start a studio and even think about comparing yourself and your work to Fortnite is like the same thing as me sitting down and watching PewDiePie videos and being like, okay, I'm going to do exactly what PewDiePie is doing here. And next week I'm going to be, it's like, no. I feel like with game studios, the first thing you need to do is you need to just aim for like breaking even and stability. Step one. Because if you can't, because if you look at a lot of stuff, there's like slow iterative building over time. Even Fortnite, that comes from Epic, right? And they didn't just appear out of nowhere. There was a long back history to that. And so I feel like with the newer studios too, like the first step one should be, can we just make something that is literally breaking even, and just to get started, to just establish something, rather than, all right, we're going to make something and it's going to be the biggest thing ever, or like this grand success. Because now you're, like you said, you're just firing in the dark.
Studios that are dying now. Like right now, what's happening is all these extraction shooters are coming out. Like like Arc Raiders. That was really that was big and it was good, I guess. But like, there's been a ton of them, and I feel like most of them flop. They're all like Tarkov ripoffs in some way or another. But it's like, these aren't usually. It's not these small indies that are trying to do it. It's usually these big developers that are coming in and they're like, oh, this is the thing we've got to do. And then they do it. But I think the thing is, they often do it, but they don't Like they'll strip out feature. Very rarely do developers come in and they are going to say, "There's this thing." They did, like Tarkov did it pretty cool, but we're going to make the mechanics of it way cooler. We've got all these interesting things we're adding that weren't in there. Instead, it's like adding a hashtag or something. It's like Tarkov hashtag crafting, you know, and it's
right.
Or you're like throwing in shit that like it's some executive that he's like, I hear crafting is trending well.
Yes.
Or it's like, and then you get doing it and it's like, oh, there's all these features in Tarkov that are like weird or hard to implement. It's like, okay, well, let's cut them out. We're doing hashtag crafting Tarkov. And it's like, it's not a,
that's so true.
Like
you can see that a lot.
Features. Yeah.
Where they'll take kind of more unique features of a game series that's already established and they'll swap them in for like trending stuff. It's like, what's hot right now?
They'll take out
parries are hot.
Take out good stuff.
Let's throw in parries. Yeah, let's take out.
Let's throw in furries.
Let's take out whatever was sort of like weird or unusual. Take that out and then put in kind of more trending type of stuff. You'll see that all the time.
That's what I mean when I say that. Like, I think a lot of developers are trying to make games more for a mass market because that's how you get more people, right? If you I see this a lot in strategy gaming, in new strategy games where we have I have this thing what I call genre tourists. Okay, so they're people who they buy like a 4X game, say like some Civilization like game, or they play something like Stellaris, which is sort of a 4X like game, and it's very specific in what it does. And then they go, okay, I'm looking for new 4X games, and people will recommend them to them. Oh, I've played Stellaris. And then they'll come back, and I watch it happen. Like, I watch this happen, like, loads. They'll go, oh, I didn't like this, it's too difficult, or I didn't like this because it's not enough like X. And what they're doing is they make demands as well. They're like, I don't like this genre because this genre, the classic thing in 4X is there's too many units to manage, or there's too many cities to manage. And they're like, oh, I don't like games, that have too many cities managed. It's like, well, what games have you played before? Usually turns out they've played like Tactics or something else, like some other adjacent sort of like vaguely related strategy game where you don't have so much stuff. Like, it's not an empire building game. So I'm seeing this push now in 4X, particularly where people are like, we don't want lots of cities to manage. We don't want lots of units to manage. We want better, they talk vaguely about we want better UI for scaling stuff, as Lucid and I have talked about. But usually they want stuff to be more like the genre they've come from. And so I think developers listen very carefully to these people. They're like, right, how can we make this existing thing more like what they have come from? And the more you do this, the more you homogenize your game into this kind of soup. And it starts pushing out the players with veteran skills. That goes back to
what I was saying before, because I think like the player side of this thing, like I think that is always going to exist because it's like a very natural relationship that just happens when you first come into something. I remember I even thought this when I was like first playing Battle Garega. I was playing Garega my very first time. I was like, man, this should be more like a cave game. This should be more bullet hell. And I think this is just a natural behavior when people are first getting into a new style of design or something. But the problem is what you're saying before, the developers. What should happen is developers should just be like, give it time, you'll get into it, give it time. Because I do think there is a certain amount of time that needs to pass sometimes to get into a more unique style of design. But the problem is now the developers don't say, all right, give it time, trust me. This is really good. You'll get there. Instead, they're like, oh, really? Okay, well, what do you want us to change?
Yeah, because they haven't got that time. Gamers won't give them the time. They won't because, like I say, there's less attention span to some extent. And I think partly that's to do with the sheer volume of games we've got. I mean, like back in the day, when we were younger, we had console games or whatever. You might have spent $50, $60 on a game, and that probably was all you had to play for 6 months or something.
Yep. I remember
you got the money for another one.
Clearly.
Yeah, sure. So
for better and for worse, yes.
For better and for worse, and like now we are flooded with choice, and so gamers, developers, they're fully aware that if you don't grab somebody pretty quickly, they're immediately going to they'll refund your game, and then they'll go and look at something else that's shiny that comes along. And so they're kind of forced into this behavior. They have to make their games more accessible.
Forced into it, but I think it's a really hard impulse to not do. I think that's the.
Well, they want to make money. Like, I think if you've got a big studio and you've got you've got developer mouths to feed, so to speak, then it's
I'll give you an example. Like for example, like Virtua Fighter with Sega. We'll see with 6, but so far, every person in the universe ever up until Tekken 8 was telling look at all the fighting game influencers. All of them are saying Virtua Fighter needs to be more like Tekken. That is what needs to happen. The next Virtua Fighter that comes out needs to be more like Tekken in this way, in that way, in this way. Look, Tekken is successful. Virtua Fighter is not successful. I mean, it's obvious. This is what you have to do. This is how it needs to be. But Sega so far have not been like, all right, let's turn Virtua Fighter into Tekken. And I think maybe this is more just because, the older, more experienced developers are like, no, no, Virtua Fighter's lit. No, this thing's amazing. So it's not that I don't think but I think if you're less secure of a developer, you're like a little bit more unsure and everyone's telling you to change your game, you're going to be like, all right, I guess you guys are right. Let me change it.
I think it was like with those guys, though, with Sega and Virtua Fighter, that's very much like what you had with the remastered version of StarCraft. I think that the Korean players would have kicked the hell off if they'd have messed that game up.
Yeah, they would have murdered.
They would have murdered developers. There'd have been, terrorist attacks and stuff. And I think it'd be the same, like in Japan, particularly. Virtua Fighter is such a beloved game amongst the Japanese arcade gamers that if they did make it like Tekken, they'd never be forgiven. It would be a nail in the coffin, man, for Sega.
Yeah, but I definitely think that. But I also think another difference is that the Virtua Fighter developers have legitimate pride in the series. That to them, they just would not do that. Even if every market force ever told them, we'll see so far, but looking like they just have so much pride in Virtua Fighter that they're like, no, for years, Tekken has copied us. For years, Tekken has like watered down what we've done. We're not going to just do that now because it's trendy. And I think that's a phenomenon that happens a lot with a lot of modern developers where they're a little insecure about their games. And so any sort of pushback towards something that's more popular or more trendy, they really cave to that a lot. They really go, okay, fine, let's do that.
All right, I guess maybe we start wrapping up. What are final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say my final thought with this sort of phenomenon that we're seeing of mainstream games becoming easier, mainstream games really tailoring themselves to the most beginner player possible. Part of that is, I think, again, I liked what Lucid was saying, where like game design has become way too formal of a system where developers really think, oh, this is it. This is the correct way in which games must be made. And it starts to reinforce itself, where it's like, everyone should be able to play your game with no frustrations. And the way this is achieved is, look at these games. This is how they achieve that. So everyone do that. And then everyone does that. And then it like keeps reinforcing itself more and more. And I think the other big creation of this phenomenon is this focus on gameplay loops, where they're so concerned about enforcing a loop that they don't see like the problems with not having counter incentives to that loop. So then once you learn the game, you like learn the game and it just reinforces itself over and over and over and over and over to the point where there's that initial learning challenge. And then once that's solved, boom, game completed.
Yeah.
I think you're dead right. And those 2 points move together as well. Like I've never had so much pushback in my life talking about when I was criticizing the idea of gameplay loops in one of my own communities.
Well, it's like gospel.
Like, often
it is like game design gospel.
They got really angry.
Don't you think, though, this is interesting, going back to Lucid's point of how a lot of this has become like formalized into education and stuff, that also creates an effect where I paid $70,000 to learn that gameplay loops are correct. I have a degree that says that I am correct, that gameplay loops are correct. So shut your mouth about gameplay loops not being correct, because I've invested years and lots of money into this concept.
Yeah.
I think there's something to that as well. Yeah.
You become an expert in gameplay loops.
I'm an expert that's never made a good video game.
Right, exactly.
It's like, oh, okay, they're experts.
Okay. I really do think a lot of this does go back to what Lucid was saying about like the formalization of these, because if there's no formalization of this, if this is all pure, just
it'd be the weirdest coincidence.
Yes.
Like imagine if there wasn't how are all these people doing the same thing at the same time?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, and going back to the early PC era, when this formal stuff didn't exist, you have all these different games and they're all doing things in all their different ways, and some of them work better than others, but you can definitely tell there's less standardization. You can definitely tell, this is a Blizzard game because look at how it's doing it. Oh, this is Unreal, Epic, their games were all distinct. Like everything felt a lot more distinct because I think it was less formal.
Yeah, I've come across this in UI design. Another thing, I bang my head against a wall trying to tell people in the strategy community that I think part of the reason why people are getting bored of a lot of the games so fast now is because they've homogenized things like the user interface to the point where all the games feel the same. And even if you don't if you're not consciously aware of it, your subconscious is screaming, I've done this before. And I've found that I might be repeating myself. I forget if I talked about this the last time we talked about this, but there's this one UI design Bible that all the user interface people who went to university and did that degree, on how to make user interfaces, they all follow this one book. And, I think that
it's not
absolutely
a style,
shows.
It's the correct. That's the difference, because you could have this is our style of UI design, but that's not how it's discussed. It's discussed, no, this is correct user design. Yes. This is how it's done.
There's principles that you must follow. These are the principles and they are correct. And, then I'll refer you to Bruce Lee, who said something like, read the rule book and then burn it, basically. Absorb it and burn it. Yeah. Because, it's a very Taoist thing, but you really want to be kind of absorbing information, taking it in, seeing how you have interpreted that. How does it work? Is it, use the principle of evolution. Is it working? If not, you should always throw the manual in the bin after you've read it, basically. And I think that's because if you become dogmatic about things, then, that's when we get stuck in loops.
Yeah, I think so, especially too, because in game design especially, there can be two good ideas that are incompatible, but in their own frameworks are good. Like I was saying, like a really aesthetic-based game, something like Animal Crossing. Like if you sit down as a developer and you're like, I'm going to make a really aesthetic-based game, and that is going to be the driving principle behind this design, you can make something that's very unique and very cool that could connect with an audience that normally wouldn't connect with games, maybe. And then you could have another style of design where, it's a very goal-oriented, challenge-oriented style of game design. And that can be its own amazing thing, obviously. But sometimes you can't put these two things together completely harmoniously. One will start to inflict with the other too much, So sometimes you have to know the parameters of what you're going for, too.
Yeah, which demographic of the population you're targeting there. Because it's different. Animal Crossing is I think it's 80% women that play that or something. So,
yeah.
And I don't mean to cast any shade at it in any way. It's just people have different things they want.
Yeah, everyone likes different stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's certain elements of these games that are so useful, but you have to know what those elements are and what elements of those can cross over beautifully. Like, for example, like UI stuff, like having these fun, just it feels good to hit menus, and it feels like fun and fresh to hit menus. That could be translated over to lots of different styles of games. But it's when it gets into what Battle Mode was saying, where you begin the game and the campaign begins with a 2-hour character customization. You're like, okay, no, this is starting to interfere with the core of this game.
Yeah, and some games hit both genders well. Like Stardew Valley is a good example. There's a ton of things that both genders like in there. Farming simulators tend to do that pretty well.
Harvest Moon, I love that one too.
Harvest Moon did, But
I liked Stardew Valley. I was surprised at how much I liked it as well. Stardew Valley, sorry. I actually played it right through.
Very cozy, fun to play. I liked it too.
Yeah, my only problem with Stardew Valley is whenever I play it, I immediately go, I should just play Harvest Moon every single time. Because I really love Harvest Moon and I don't play it enough. So it just overlaps with Harvest Moon a little bit too much for me. But it does seem really cool. It does seem really cool though.
Yeah. So I think the homogenization of games in terms of borrowing mechanics out of out of context to what what worked before,
what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So like we see this in 4X a lot, where it's a 4X game, it's got to have explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. So we have to have diplomacy, and even if it works contrary to the game's design, this I think that's another way that the games can actually change. Or can be the design can be made worse because they're trying to either fit to an existing genre a little bit too much to attract that sort of audience, or like you say, adding crafting to everything is the other one.
Right.
Sorry,
adding crafting to Resident Evil 4. Why was that necessary?
Yeah, it didn't do anything for the game.
Okay.
Yeah, and often it's like a corporate directive, so it's not like, why is crafting fun? Like, if you understand that, you might have a much better job at adding a good crafting system and understanding which games it would be good in and which it wouldn't.
You know what's so funny, too, about like these corporate design things is like, I feel like with game design, that should be left much more to the artistic vision of the game developers. And I feel like the corporate guys, why don't they spend more time focusing on like advertising and marketing and like their shit rather than worrying about the game design? Like they should just be sitting around thinking, all right, how do we make the advertising for the campaign and for the game cool and fresh and fun? Like how do we make... I mean, they could be spending their time working on that sort of stuff rather than
crafting hot. You have a fiduciary duty to make sure the game's good. Like if it's a 6-year project and on year 3 I look at it and I have, let's say I'm a really good corporate executive and I know looking at it it's going to be a pile of shit and it's not going to sell. My job is to axe it right then or get them to change.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot of these guys don't know, or you know.
Yeah, I mean, in like a perfect world, you'd have like a really... I guess in Japan, they are a little better about this. Like, for example, this has its own issues, but for example, a funny trend is like, if you're a really like Shinji Mikami, you're a really successful, amazing game director, your reward is you are no longer a game director. Now you're a manager. So it's like... Yeah, so you have like more competent managers, but then you lose the game developer talent to some degree.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword there, but yeah, you'd want the guy who's the producer to like, I guess Miyamoto and Nintendo would be someone like this who kind of knows game design to some degree to be able to tell, all right, this is going sideways. This is not going well.
I think my closing thought is that I don't think players have changed that much. I think this idea of like the casual player... I mean, sure, there's casual players out there. There's casual games that I play, like Stardew Valley's casual. It was fun to play. But the idea of this casual player who just wants slop where the numbers go up and you do the same thing over and over again with different numbers, I think this is mostly a myth. I think it mostly doesn't exist. I think it's not players that have changed that the companies need to adapt to. It's the companies that have changed and the players are wondering what the fuck has happened. So...
And the relationship between the players and the games has shifted somewhat because of like the accessibility the developers have to the players and the players have to the developers. They're a little too close to each other, I think.
Yeah, there's a feedback loop though, and I think that if it's not addressed, it will be to the point where people are trained to become slop eaters. I think I do think that's a problem. Like, and I don't push back a little bit. Like, I don't think that, casual gamers are a problem. It's not that. It's that the game's design is being changed in games in order to appeal to more people, particularly people who only play the game for 10 hours and then they move on to the next cool thing. Yeah, so that's where...
But I do
agree with Lucid, though, that I think it's ultimately goes back to the developers. Because I agree, like, I always look at players as like a neutral force, like water. It's like... So it's up to the developers to create the dams and the rivers and the channels to, like, get them to go places and do things. Yeah.
But I just think that,
vote, and I don't think they're voting for casual. Like, they're not voting for slop when they can help it. Like, when there's a game that comes along... Like it used to be, if you did 1 and you did version 2, you used to put a lot more interesting mechanics into. There were like things you wanted to put in 1 you couldn't. Like all these interesting new things. Like, oh, we didn't have naval combat and now we have it. Oh, we didn't have air combat, now we have it. And you just add cool things. And oh, before we just had 2 types of guns, but now we have 6. Like they added in, that was like a thing. You would add interesting things. Yeah. And now it's like either the things you add aren't interesting because it just make the numbers go up, right? Or they're reducing things because it's like that's the nouveau thing to do. And
yeah, I know in fighting games there's like actually a very discrete moment where this stopped, which was at the end of the arcade era, like Street Fighter 3, Third Strike, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, where they were adding a lot of really cool, deep mechanics. And then the casual players were like, whoa, dude, we're just going to play something a little simpler. I remember that being a point. But also now I think it is going the other way too hard. Like, for example, they announced this new fighting game that's like no motion inputs. And that's almost like the standard now. It used to be like, whoa, dude, no motion inputs. Now it's like, yeah, we didn't even expect there to be motion inputs. That's like, not something we're going to get anymore.
Yeah, because people don't want to sit, because like, you know, to get that casual market, the casual market, casual gamers don't want to have to practice. They don't want to sit to have to learn and sit and practice stuff. They want the one button inputs because it's easy. I was having an argument with somebody at Explorminate the other day. He loves it. He loves all these really simple games because he says that I don't think that skill expression should be part of the game. I think it, you know, like you shouldn't have to learn to get good at the game or practice to get good at the game. It should be about immediately being, you know, the interface of the game should be such that you are immediately good at it, and then you're immediately in some battle of wills with someone. And I don't agree with that. I think I like practice. I like to learn.
I think that's an ultra minority opinion.
I don't think it is.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think it is a minority.
It's a growing opinion in fighting games for sure. But I think it's because the fighting game audience is shifting as an entire player base. So you're going to see this growing more, because what's happening is the fighting game players who value these types of things are getting pushed out, myself included. And then a new audience is being pulled in that so it's like, I feel like there's actually a shift happening in the fighting game audience as a whole. Yeah. And I'm not blaming more legacy players are getting pushed out, and the newer, like, what's that called? There's like a whole idea of like a selection bias, I think it is, where it's like, but this goes back to the developers, is what I'm saying. Like the developers are selecting a new audience. There's like, all right, we had this audience that valued these things, but they're not big enough. So get them out of here. We're going to find a new audience that values these things, and they're bigger.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Audience. Yeah.
I'm not blaming players. I don't do that. Like, you know, I'm not blaming individuals or even big groups of players. I'm not saying that casual gamers are bad in any way. It's developers needing. They need to court that big market, and in order to do that, they have to dumb games down. And that's where I'm starting to see it in a big way in strategy gaming. Although I'm getting, you know, I get mixed messages about it, because certain people seems to think that strategy games are getting overly complex, which I think is part of the, you know, it's like, well, if you think that newer games are overly complex, I don't know what to say to you, because I'm not seeing that, generally speaking. At least not in mainstream strategy games. Like, I mean, if you look, Civ 7 is a perfect example of this from what I've seen of it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so, but I think Lucy's right.
Let me just hit on this for a second. For Civ 7, it's like you have four or five resources maybe. And most of your decisions in the game are, would you like 5 of this resource, or would you like 5 of this resource, or would you like 5 of this resource, or would you like 5 of this resource? And as the developer, you want to balance the game so you can win the game by collecting enough of any of the resources.
Right.
How the fuck are you supposed to make this interesting?
Where's the competition or what? You need some kind of chaos, don't you, in order to generate interest?
It's impossible. Yeah. You can't. It's an impossible problem, and that's why the game fucking bombed, because it's not complicated. It's not interesting. There's no edges. There's no mechanics. You know.
So like I think, Lucid, you're right. I think that, you know, that I sometimes I'm aware. I spoke about this at the start. I'm aware of my own bias in the sense that I will favor games, you know, that are difficult, and I kind of gravitate towards communities where people do like to be pushed. And I think that does skew my view a little bit. But so, you know, I'm not saying that the average bell curve of people are people who are, you know, idiots or anything like that. That's not really what I mean. It's more that developers they're having to change their games just to court more people, and in order to do that, they have to the end result, at least, is, for me, games feel like there's this sort of, like you say, Lucid, like rounding off of the edges of kind of like difficulty, complexity, very, very steady difficulty curves, if there's a difficulty curve at all, you know. And it's just so, but I feel a little bit more.
What's happening a lot is developers all want the same audience. They look and be like, look at that audience. I want that. And then the other developer's like, yeah, I want that audience too. So everyone's like fighting over the exact same audience, rather than games having a little bit more of like their own unique audience that comes to them, and that their own like ecosystem. Everyone wants that big old giant audience. Everyone wants that one.
Yeah. And that's not how it was done traditionally, was it? You try to make your game popular, but like I'm of the mindset that you make something good first, then you try to make it popular. Yeah, make something good, because if you make something of if you make a high quality piece of art, people are naturally going to be attracted to it. Whereas I think if you try to make something mass marketable, I think Andy Warhol had something to say about this. With his Campbell's soup cans kind of the pop art stuff. I think that was that's actually quite a clever piece of work, and it says a lot about commoditization of artwork. And I think if we try to make things to sell, it naturally cheapens the end result. And but I
also just think about it in like a very simple way, which is, would you rather make something that's amazing but niche, or something that's shitty and niche? Because like the gamble you're making, if you're like, all right, I'm going to intentionally dumb my game down for popularity, or I'm going to make it, kind of mediocre for popularity. That's one thing if it's actually successful. But think of the Concords of the world. Think of the games where they went for that and then they failed, and then you have nothing. There's like nothing good. It's not popular or good.
I mean, like Lucid, like when you're making your just very quickly before we end, because I know we're running out of time, but like when you're making your game, how are you kind of considering like what your market is? Are you thinking I want as many people to play it as possible? Or is it more like I'd rather have a niche game that is good? Like what is your approach for this? Obviously you want more money. I'm sure that's obvious, but like where's the line?
No, I mean the money, I'm actually not too worried about that, but I think it's like I think first of all you have to like games to be a game developer. You have to like them a lot, and you have to assume that a lot of other people like the same kind of games you do. So if you only like niche games, like if I only liked Dominions, that would be a little weird, So I need to have other games that I like that other people like. And like, this is the thing. If you're too weird of a developer, like if you're too different than the most people who are going to be buying games, you probably won't make games that they're going to want to buy.
Yeah.
And then you need to make a game that is really fun and interesting to play for the first 2 hours, and it keeps getting fun and interesting. So that's what we're trying to do. So it shouldn't be like you get in and the first 2 hours are like mindless slogging. It should be like fun little things and you figure it out. And it also should be like the decisions you make matter. If either thing you do would result in you winning, then like in a strategy game, there might be 20 things you could do. If any of those are fine and you'll probably end up winning anyway, then we haven't done it right. If only one of those things you would win, that might be kind of putting the game on rails too much, where it's just like a puzzle game and you have to figure it out. So I think having it where there's like really fun, interesting mechanics that are intuitive, because that's another thing. You introduce a ton of mechanics and they're really complicated and not related to things we think about already. So like we're doing a combat game. So we're putting in a bunch of like very interesting mechanics in the actual combat with like complicated stats and things. But if you had to learn all those stats and formulas we're putting in, the game wouldn't be fun.
Yeah.
But if it's like a guy with the spear repels a guy running at him with 2 daggers, and the guy with the spear pokes him, and you see that the guy with the dagger can't get in close, you intuitively understand what happens. You don't need to know the formula.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Like that would be a fun mechanic to introduce if you're into like war strategy games. Is like, okay, like let's show you how repels work. That might be really important for winning a fight, and then let's show you like how to get past repels, and that would be important for winning another fight. And then by the time you have 50 of those mechanics, and now there's an enemy coming up and it's got 13 of them. Okay, well, which unit is best? Like what army composition is good versus the particular thing? Well, that's a really complicated thing to figure out now. And if you've been playing the whole time and you've been having fun learning these little things along the way, then it should still be fun solving that problem. So I think the way we're thinking about it is make it very fun with like interesting, fun shit to do at the beginning. It shouldn't be boring, but not overwhelm you with mechanics. And then as the game goes, you get way more mechanics, more interesting units, more things, and hopefully it just stays fun. So that's how we think about it.
Because I'm making a retro game at the moment for a retro console called, or a retro computer called the Commander X16. It's kind of like a Commodore 64 sort of SNES kind of cross, I guess. And I've been playing a lot of retro games. Like, so I've been playing a lot of emulated games and, going back to the past to see what was working, what worked and how things worked. And it's been really eye-opening just to see how fast games get into those games, like on the NES or the Genesis or Super Nintendo, whatever, or our old arcade games. It's such a breath of fresh air coming from playing modern stuff. And like
the pace difference is crazy.
The difference in pacing is crazy. Like, I've been playing this game called Road Rash, the original Road Rash on Sega Genesis, and that's a good game. And it's, even though it's like 8 frames a second or something, it's really like kind of clunky, but the gameplay is all built around that pace, and it's so good. And I was like, man, I remember playing this when I was a kid, and I don't remember it being this good as I'm experiencing it now. And so that's my approach at the moment. I'm going back and looking at these old games and trying to figure out what is it that these developers knew. Like, they knew their limitations, I guess, and the hardware, but what is it they knew about games design that seems to have been bypassed, or developers are too clever for now? Do you know what I mean?
That's one more thing too. Like, when you're introducing mechanics, like, hey, I'm going to introduce the repel mechanic. If it's like, I tell you, hey, you have to put pikemen in, and then you put pikemen in and it works, and then I take you to the next scenario, and I'm like, I'm going to introduce archery. You need to build archers here. And then you build the archer and it works. There's a bunch of things going wrong with that. The first one is, I'm wasting a lot of your time with stupid dialogue and cutscenes that you probably are going to hate me for. And the second is, you get zero sense of satisfaction when you figure it out, because you're just doing what I told you.
Yes.
So let the guy fucking figure it out. It's not hard. There's guys running around with daggers. Maybe pikes will be good because he can't get in close. Like, let them fucking figure it out. And if the player learns that their intuition is actually a useful tool for figuring stuff out, then that's good, because then they're going to use that intuition for other things, and it's going to feel good when it works. Yeah. So, anyway.
Good points. Right, guys. Well, thanks so much for that. I think we covered a lot of bases. So this is always really good for me as well, because it kind of allows me to organize my thoughts, and it kind of makes me realize how sort of small-minded some of my opinions are, because you guys are really good at being able to expand out on them and kind of find weaknesses in them. So super useful for me in a very selfish way.
Fun,
but I hope
really fun discussion.
Yeah, definitely. I love talking about this stuff, man. Thank you. Oh, that's great. And hopefully the people at home will enjoy it too. Remember to like and subscribe, all that kind of YouTube stuff, because we're Meta Abuse. We're trying to get more stuff out more regularly if we can, but it's kind of this is a kind of a hobby project for us, really. But I did notice that a lot of people who are listening to it aren't actually subscribed, so if you could subscribe, that'd be really helpful. And thanks a lot for listening. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to have you, man.
No problem.
And Lucid, always, mate. It's always great to talk to you. Well, this was Ben, Mark, and Lucid for Meta Abuse. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time. Take care.